Lord Chudley took little joy in this kind of sport, which perhaps is a reason why I also disliked the sight. Nancy, also as well as myself, cared but little to see this famous Epsom sport, nor indeed did any of the ladies who formed part of our more intimate company. But on this occasion, as Will was to run a 3-year-old of his own training, and as he was going to ride the horse himself, and had staked 30 guineas beside bets upon the event, it was judged a duty owed to him by the family that all should go. Mrs. Esther went out of respect to Lady Levitt, Mr. Stalibras, because he remembered how Pindar had sung of the Olympian Games, and was suddenly fired with the desire of writing a Pindaric ode upon the Epsom contests. Now, it behoves a poet who sings of a horse race, first to witness one. Therefore he came to see how it would lend itself to modern metaphor. Sir Miles came because he could get the chance of a few bets upon the race, and because, when there were no cards to the fore, he liked, he said, to hear me talk. Harry Temple came, grumbling and protesting that for men of learning and fashion nothing was more barbarous and tedious than this sport. Could we have had chariot racing, with athletic games after the manner of the ancients, he would have been pleased. As it was, he hoped that Will would win, but feared that a clown and his money were soon parted, with other remarks equally good-natured. The race was to be run at 11:30. We had chairs for such as preferred being carried, but the younger ladies walked. We made a gallant procession as we came upon the course, all the ladies wearing Will's colors, which were red and blue. They had railed off a piece of ground, where the better sort could stand without being molested by the crowd which always congregates when a great race is to be run. Indeed, on this occasion, it seemed as if all the idle fellows for 20 miles round had gathered together on the downs with one consent, and with them half the rustics of the villages, the tradesmen and workmen of Epsom, Leatherhead, and Dorking, and the greater part of the company at the wells. There were gypsies to tell our fortunes or steal our poultry, but I, for one, had had enough already of fortune-telling from the tent of the pretended wizard of the masquerade. There were Italians leading a bear. There were a couple of rough men with a bull which was presently to be baited. A canvas enclosure was run up on poles, within which the Cornish giant would wrestle all comers at 6 pence a throw. Another, where a prize fight would be held, admittance 1 shilling, with 2 pence each for the defeated man. A puppet play was shown for a penny. For 2 pence you might see a rare piece of art, the subject of which I know not, and in wax, the histories of fair Rosamond and Susanna. Other amusements there were. I at first took all in honor of Will and his race, but presently learned that a fair had been held at Leatherhead the day before, and that these people, hearing of what was forward, came over to get what could be picked up. And as one fool makes many, the knowledge of their coming, with the race for an excuse, brought out all the country people, mouth agape, as is their wont. The horses presently rode out of the paddock, a place where they weigh, dress, put on the saddles, and adjust the preliminaries. Will in his cap pulled over his ears like a nightcap, because a jockey wears no wig, and in silk jacket, striped with blue and red, riding as if he was part of the animal he sat, looked in his true place. Ever after I have thought of the gallant show he made, while with left hand holding the whip, he bridled the beautiful creature, which but for his control would have been bounding and galloping over the plain. But they explained to us that race horses know when racing is meant, and behave accordingly, save that they cannot always be refrained from starting before the time. Will's rival and competitor, whose name I forget, but I had never seen him before, was a man of slighter figure, who rode equally well, but did not at the same time appear to such advantage on horseback. Lord Chudley explained to us that while Will rode naturally, sitting his horse as if he understood what the creature wished to do, and where he wanted to go, the other man sat him by rule of thumb, as if the horse was to understand his master, and not the master his horse. I have ridden a great deal since then, and I know now the justice of my lord's remarks, though I own that this perfect understanding between horse and rider is not commonly found. And for my own part I remember but one horse, 3 parts Arabian, with which I ever arrived at a complete understanding. Even with him the understanding was one-sided, and ended in his always going whithersoever he pleased. The adversary's colors were white and green, pretty colors, though bad for the complexion of women, so that I was glad Will's were suited to the roses of our cheeks. They began by riding up and down for a quarter of an hour, Will looking mighty important, stroking his horse, patting his neck, talking to him, checking him when he broke into a canter or a gallop. The other man, he in white and green, had trouble to keep his horse from fairly bolting with him, which he did for a little distance more than once. Then the starters took their places, and the judge his, in front of the winning post, and the horses started. White and green led for a quarter of a mile, but Will was close behind. It was pretty to see the eagerness of the horses, how they pressed forward with straining necks. Will is holding back, cried Harry with flashing eyes. Wait till they are over the hill. I feel like Pindar, cried Mr. Stalabras. Would that Mr. Levitt was Hiero of Syracuse. Oh, Will, exclaimed Nancy as if he could hear. Spur up your horse. If you lose the race I will never forgive you. We all stood with parted lips and beating hearts. Yes, we understood the joy of horse racing, the uncertainty of the struggle, the ambition of the noble creatures, the eagerness of the riders, their skill, their coolness, the shouts of the people, ah, the race is over. Just before the finish, say 200 yards the other side of the winning post, Will rose in his saddle, plied whip, and cried to his horse. It answered with a rush as if struck by a sudden determination to be first. The other horse, a little tired perhaps, bounded onward as well, but Will took the lead and kept it. In a moment the race was finished, and Will rode gallantly past us, ahead by a whole length, amid the cheers and applause of the people. When the race was finished, the visitors ran backward and forwards, congratulating or condoling with each other. Many a long face was pulled as the bets were paid. Many a jolly face broadened and became more jolly as the money went into pocket. And then, I saw what is meant by the old saying about money made over the devil's back. For those who lost, lost outright, which cannot be denied. But those who won immediately took their friends to the booths where beer and wine and rum were sold, and straightway got rid of a portion of their winnings. No doubt the rest went in the course of the day in debauchery, so that the money won upon the race benefited no one, except the people who sold drink. And they, to my mind, are the last persons whom one would wish to benefit, considering what a dreadful thing in this country is the curse of drink. If Will looked a gallant rider on horseback, he cut but a sorry figure among the gentlemen when he came forth from the paddock, having taken off his jacket and put on again his wig, coat, and waistcoat. For he walked heavily, rolling in his gait as a ploughboy not a sailor, and his clothes were muddy and disordered while his wig was awry. Lady Levitt beckoned to him, and he came towards us sheepishly bold, as is the way with rustic gentlemen. So Will, shouted his father heartily, thou hast won the match. Well rode, my boy. Well rode, cried all, well rode. He received our congratulations with a grin of satisfaction, saluting the company with a grin, and his knuckles to his forehead like a jockey. On recovering, he examined us all leisurely. Aye, he said, there you are, Harry, talking to the women about books and poetry and stuff. What good is that when a race is on? Might as well have stayed at Cambridge. Well, Nancy, oh, I warrant you, so fine as no one in the country would know you. Fine feathers make fine birds, and, here he saw me, and stared hard with his mouth open. Gad so, it's Kitty, hoop, hollow. Upon this he put both hands to his mouth and raised such a shout that we all stopped our ears, and the dogs barked and ran about furiously as if in search of a fox. Found again, Kitty, I am right glad to see thee. Did I ride well? Were you proud to see me coming in by a neck? Thinks I don't care who's looking on, but I'll show them Will Levitt knows how to ride. If I'd known it was you I would have landed the stakes by 3 clear lengths, I would. Let me look at thee, Kitty. Now, gentlemen, by your leave. He shoved aside Lord Chudley and Harry and pushed between them. Let me look at thee well, aye, more fine feathers, but here he swore great oaths. There never was anything beneath them but the finest of birds ever hatched. Thank you, Will, for the compliment, I began. Why, if anyone should compliment you, Kitty, who but I? I thought of the broken sixpence and trembled. A most pretty speech indeed, said Peggy Baker. Another of Miss Pleydell's swains, I suppose. My brother, said Nancy, has been Kitty's swain since he was old enough to walk. That is, about the time when Kitty was born. He is as old a swain as Mr. Temple here. I don't know naught about swains, said Will, but I'm Kitty's sweetheart. And if any man says nay to that, why let him step to the front, and we'll have that business settled on the grass and no time wasted. Brother, cried Nancy, greatly incensed by a remark of such low breeding, remember that you are here among gentlemen, who do not fight with cudgels and fists for the favors of ladies. Nay, dear Miss Levitt, said Peggy, laughing, I find Mr. William vastly amusing. No doubt we might have a contest, a tournament after the manner of the ancients, with Miss Pleydell as the Queen of Beauty, to give her favors to the conquering knight. I believe we can often witness a battle with swords and pistols if we get up early enough in Hyde Park, but a duel with fists and cudgels would be much more entertaining. Thank you, miss, said Will. I should like to see the man who would stand up against me. I think, Lord Chudley interposed, that as no one is likely to gratify this gentleman's strange invitation, we may return to the town. Miss Playdell, we wait your orders. Will was about to say something rude, when his sister seized him by the arm and whispered in his ear. "Oh Lord, a lord," he cried. "I beg your lordship's pardon. There, that is just like you, Nancy, not to tell me at the beginning. Well, Kitty, I am going to look after the horse, then I will come to see thee. Your admirer is a bucolic of an order, not often found among the sons of such country gentlemen as Sir Robert Levitt," said Lord Chudley presently. "He is addicted to horses and dogs, and he seems to consider that he may claim, or show, some sort of equal attachment to me," I answered. Then I told him the story of the broken sixpence, and how I became engaged, without knowing it, to both Harry Temple and Will Levitt on the same day. My lord laughed, and then became grave. "I do not wonder," he said, "that all classes of men have fallen in love with the sweetest and most charming of her sex. That does not surprise me. Still, though we have disposed of Mr. Temple, who is, I am bound to say, a gentleman open to reason, there may be more trouble with this headstrong country lad, who is evidently in sober earnest, as I saw from his eyes. What shall we do, Kitty?" "My lord," I whispered, "let me advise for your safety. Withdraw yourself for a while from Epsom. Give up Durdens and go to London. I could not bear to see you embroiled with this rude and boisterous clown. Oh, how could such a woman as Lady Levitt have such a son? Leave me to deal with him as best I can." But he laughed at this. To be sure, fear had no part in the composition of this noble, this incomparable man. Should I run away because a rustic says he loves my Kitty? But then his forehead clouded again. Yet, alas, for my folly and my crime, I may not call her my Kitty. "Oh yes, my lord, call me always thine. Indeed, I am all thine own, if only I could think myself worthy." We were walking together, the others a little distance behind us, and he could do no more than touch my fingers with his own. Alas, the very touch of his fingers caused a delightful tremor to run through my veins, so helplessly, so deeply was I in love with him. Thus we walked, not hand in hand, yet from time to time our hands met. And thus we talked, not as betrothed lovers, yet as lovers. Thus my lord spoke to me, confiding to me his most secret affairs, his projects and his ambitions, as no man can tell them save to a woman he loves. Truly, it was a sweet and delicious time. I fondly turn to it now, after so many years, not, heaven knows, with regret, any more than September, rich in golden harvest and laden orchards, regrets the sweet and tender April, when all the gardens were white and pink with the blossoms of plum and pear and apple, and the fields were green with the springing barley, oats and wheat. Yet a dear, delightful time, only spoiled by that skeleton in the cupboard, that consciousness that the only person who stood between my lord and his happiness was the woman he loved. Heard man ever so strange, so pitiful a case? At the foot of the hill Lord Chudley left us, and turned in the direction of Durdens, where he remained all that day, coming not to the assembly in the evening. Mrs. Esther and I went home together to dinner, and I know not who was the better pleased with the sport and the gaiety of the morning, my kind madam or Cicely, the maid, who had been upon the downs and had her fortune told by the gypsies, and it was a good one. "But my dear," said Mrs. Esther, "it is strange indeed that so loutish and countrified a bumpkin should be the son of parents so well bred as Sir Robert and Lady Levitt." "Yet," I said, "the loutish bumpkin would have me marry him. Dear lady, would you wish your Kitty to be the wife of a man who loves the stable first, the kennel next, and his wife after his horses and his dogs?" After dinner, as I expected, Will Levitt called in person. He had been drinking strong ale with his dinner, and his speech was thick. "Your servant, madam," he said to Mrs. Esther. "I want speech, if I may have it, with Miss Kitty, alone by herself, for all she sits with her finger in her mouth yonder, as if she was not jumping with joy to see me again." "Sir," I cried. "Oh, I know your ways and tricks. No use pretending with me, yet I like them to be skittish. It is their nature to. For all your fine frocks, you're none of you any better than Molly the blacksmith's girl or Sukey at the mill. Never mind, my girl, be as fresh and frolic as you please. I like you the better for it before we are married." "Kitty dear," cried Mrs. Esther in alarm, "what does this gentleman mean?" "I do not know, dear madam. Pray, Will, if you can, explain what you mean." "Explain, explain, why," here he swore again, but I will not write down his profane and wicked language. Suffice it to say that he called heaven and earth to witness his astonishment. Why, you mean to look me in the face and tell me you don't know. We are old friends, Will, I said. And I should like, for Nancy's sake, and because Lady Levitt has been almost a mother to me, out of her extreme kindness, that we should remain friends. But when a gentleman salutes me before a company of gentlemen and ladies as his sweetheart, when he talks of fighting other gentlemen, like a rustic on a village green. Wouldst have me fight with swords and likely as not get killed then? He asked. When he assumes these rights over me, I can ask, I think, for an explanation. Certainly, said Mrs. Esther. We are grieved, sir, to have even a moment's disagreement with the son of so honorable a gentleman and so gracious a lady as your respected father and worthy mother. But you will acknowledge that your behavior on the downs was startling to a young woman of such strict propriety as my dear Kitty. He looked from one to the other, as if in a dream. Then he put his hand into his pocket and dragged out the half-sixpence. What's that? He asked me furiously. A broken sixpence, Will, I replied. Where is the other half? Perhaps where it was left, on the table in the parlor of the vicarage. What? He cried. Do you mean to say that you didn't break the sixpence with me? Do you mean to say, Will, that I did? As for you breaking it, I do not deny that. I remember that you snapped it between your fingers without asking me anything about it. But to say that I broke it, or assented to your breaking it, or carried away the other half. Fie, Will, fie. This wench, he said, is enough to drive a man mad. Yet for all your fine clothes and your paint and powder, Mistress Kitty, I've promised to marry you. And marry you I will. Put that in your pipe now. Marry me against my consent, Will, that can hardly be. Is it possible, cried Mrs. Esther, seriously displeased, that we have in this rude and discourteous person a son of Sir Robert Levitt? I never was crossed by woman or man or puppy yet, cried Will doggedly, and taking no notice whatever of Mrs. Esther's rebuke. And I never will be. Why, for a whole year and more I've been making preparations for it. I've broken the colt out of Rosamond by Samson and called him Kit, for you to ride. I've told the people round, so as anybody knows there's no pride in me, that I'm going to marry a parson's girl, without a farden thof a baronet to be. Will easily dropped into rustic language, where I do not always follow him. Oh, thank you, Will, that is kind indeed. But I would rather see you show the pride due to your rank and birth. You ought to refuse to marry a parson's girl. Or, if you are resolved to cast away your pride, there's many a farmer's girl, there's Jenny of the mill, or the blacksmith's Sue, more proper persons for you, I am sure, and more congenial to your tastes than the parson's girl. I don't mind your sneering, not a whit I don't, he replied. Wait till we're married, and I warrant you shall see who's got the upper hand. There'll be mighty little sneering then, I promise you. This brutal and barbarous speech made me angry. Now, Will, I said, get up and go away. We have had enough of your rustic insolence. Why, sir, it is a disgrace that a gentleman should be such a clown. Go away from Epsom. Leave a company for which your rudeness and ill temper do not fit you. Go back to your mug house, your pipe, your stables, and your kennels. If you think of marrying, wed with one of your own rank. Do you hear, sir? One of your own rank. Gentle born though you are, clown and churl is your nature. As for me, I was never promised to you, and if I had been, the spectacle of this amazing insolence would break 1,000 promises. He answered by an oath, but his eyes were full of dogged determination which I knew of old, and I was terrified, wondering what he would do. I remember, when you were a boy, your self-will and heedlessness of your sister and myself. But we are grown up now, sir, as well as yourself, and you shall find that we are no longer your servants. What, am I to marry this clown? You shall pay for this, said Will. Wait a bit, you shall pay. Am I to obey the command of this rude barbarian and become his wife, not to cross him, but to obey him in all his moods because he wills it? Are you, pray, the great bashaw? Mr. Levitt, said Mrs. Esther, I think you had better go. The Kitty you knew was a young and tender child. She is now a grown woman, with, I am happy to say, a resolution of her own. Nor is she the penniless girl that you suppose, but my heiress, though not a pimpernel by blood, yet a member of as good and honorable a house as yourself. He swore again in his clumsy country fashion that he never yet was balked by woman, and would yet have his way. Whereas, so far as he was a prophet, I am translating his rustic language into polite English. Those who attempted to say him, nay would in the long run find reason to repent with bitterness their own mistaken action. All his friends, he said, knew Will Levitt. No white-handed, slobbering, tea-drinking hanger-on to petticoats was he. Not so. He was very well known to entertain that contempt for women which is due to a man who values his self-respect and scorns lies, finery, and make-believe fine speeches. And it was also very well known to all the countryside that, give him but a fleer and a flout, he was ready with a cuff side o' the head, and if more was wanted, with a yard of tough ash, or a fist that weighed more than most. As for drink, he could toss it off with the best and carry as much. As for racing, we had seen what he could do and how gallant a rider he was. And for hunting, shooting, badger baiting, bull baiting, dog fighting, and cocking, there was not, he was ready to assure us, his match in all the country. Why then should a man, of whom his country was proud, no mealy-mouthed, Frenchified, fine gentleman of whom he would fight a dozen at once, so great was his courage, be sent about his business by a couple of women? He would let us know. He pitied our want of discernment, and was sorry for the sufferings which it would bring upon one of us, meaning Kitty, of which sufferings he was himself to be the instrument. When he had finished this harangue he banged out of the room furiously, and we heard him swearing on the stairs, and in the passage, insomuch that Cicely and her mother came up from the kitchen, and the former threatened to bring up her mop, if he did not instantly withdraw or cease from terrifying the ladies by such dreadful words. "My dear," said Mrs. Esther, "we have heard, alas, so many oaths that we do not greatly fear them. Yet this young man is violent, and I will to Lady Levitt, there to complain about her son." She put on her hat, and instantly walked to Sir Robert's lodgings, when before the baronet, Lady Levitt, and Nancy, she laid her tale. "I know not," said Lady Levitt, weeping, "what hath made our son so self-willed and so rustical. From a child he has chosen the kennel rather than the hall, and stable boys for companions rather than gentlemen." "Will is rough," said his father, "but I cannot believe that he would do any hurt to Kitty, whom he hath known, and perhaps in his way loved for so long." "Will is obstinate," said Nancy, "and he is proud and revengeful. He has told all his friends that he was about to marry Kitty. When he goes home again he will have to confess that he has been sent away." "Yet it would be a great match for Kitty," said Will's mother. "No, madam, with submission," said Mrs. Esther. "The disparity of rank is not so great, as your ladyship will own, and Kitty will have all my money. The real disparity is incompatibility of sentiment." "Father," said Nancy, "you must talk to Will, and Mrs. Pimpernel take care that Kitty be well guarded." Sir Robert remonstrated with his son. He pointed out in plain terms that the language he had used and the threats he had made were such as to show him to be entirely unfitted to be the husband of any gentlewoman. That Kitty was, he had reason to believe, promised to another man. That it was absurd of him to suppose that a claim could be founded on words addressed to a child overcome with grief at the death of her father. He spoke gravely and seriously, but he might have preached to the pigs for all the good he did. Will replied that he meant to marry Kitty, and he would marry her, that he would brain any man who stood in his way, that he never yet was crossed by a woman, and he never would, with more to the same effect, forgetting the respect due to his father. Sir Robert, not losing his patience, as he would have been perfectly justified in doing, went on to remonstrate with his son upon the position which he was born to illustrate, and the duties which that involved. Foremost among these, he said, were respect and deference to the weaker sex. Savages and barbarous men, he reminded him, use women with as little consideration as they use slaves. Indeed, because women are weak, they are, among wild tribes, slaves by birth. But, he said, for a gentleman in this age of politeness to speak of forcing a lady to marry him against her will is a thing unheard of. Why, lad, he continued, when I was at thy years, I would have scorned to think of a woman whose affections were otherwise bestowed. It would have been a thing due to my own dignity, if not to the laws of society, to leave her and look elsewhere. And what hath poor Kitty done, I pray, mistaken an offer of marriage, being then a mere child and chit of 16, for an offer of friendship? Will, turn thy heart to a better mood." Will said that it was no use talking, because his mind was made up, that he was a true Kentishman and a British bulldog. Holdfast was his name. When he made up his mind that he was going to get anything, that thing he would have. That, as for Kitty, he could no more show himself back upon the village green, or in the village inn, or at any cock-fighting, bull-baiting, badger-drawing, or horse-race, in the countryside, unless he had brought home Kitty as his wife. Wherefore he wanted no more ado, but let the girl come to her right mind and follow to heel, when she would find him, give him his own way, and no cursed contrariness, the best husband in the world. But if not, then Sir Robert spoke to other purpose. If he told his son he molested Kitty in any way whatever, he would, in his capacity as justice of the peace, have him instantly turned out of the town. If he offered her any insult or showed the least violence to her friends, he promised him, upon his honor, to disinherit him. "You may drink and smoke tobacco with your grooms and stableboys at home," he said. "I have long been resigned to that. But if you disgrace your name in this place, as sure as you bear that name, you shall no longer be heir to aught but a barren title." Will answered not, but walked away with dogged looks. Chapter 20. How Will would not be crossed. I know not what Will proposed to himself when his father at first admonished him. Perhaps, one knows not, he even tried to set before himself the reasonableness of his father's rebuke. Perhaps, as the sequel seems to show, he kept silence, resolving to have his own way somehow. However that might be, Will ceased to molest me for the time, and I was even in hopes that he had seen the hopelessness of his desires. Our days went on without any other visits from him, and he did not seek me out upon the terrace or in the assembly rooms. Poor Nancy's predictions were, however, entirely fulfilled. For Will could not, by any persuasion of hers, be induced at first to abstain from showing himself in public. To be sure, he did not run an Indian muck among the dancers, but he became the terror of the whole company for a rough boorishness which was certainly unknown before in any polite assembly. He did not try to be even decently polite. He was boorish, not like a boor but like a Tsar of Russia, with a proud sense of his own position. He behaved as if he were, at Epsom Wells, the young squire among the villagers who looked up to him as their hero and natural king. If he walked upon the terrace he pushed and elbowed the men, he jolted the ladies, he stepped upon trains, pushed aside dangling canes and deranged wigs, as if nobody was to be considered when he was present. Sometimes he went into the cardroom and took a hand. Then if he was tempted to give his antagonist the lie direct, he gave it, or if he lost he said rude things about honesty, and he was so strong, and carried so big a cudgel, that for a time nobody dared to check him. Because you see, by Nash's orders, the gentlemen wore no swords. Now, although it is possible to challenge a man and run him through, what are you to do with one who perhaps would refuse a challenge, yet would, on provocation, being horribly strong, cudgel his adversary on the spot? Of course, this kind of thing could not last. It went on just as long as the forbearance of the gentleman allowed, and then was brought to an end. As for Will, during the first few days he had not the least consideration for anyone. All was to give way to his caprice. I have already remarked upon the very singular love which young men of all ranks seem to have for chucking under the chin young women of the lower classes. It was very well known at Epsom Wells that many gentlemen rose early in the morning in order to enjoy this pastime upon the chins of the higglers, who brought the fruit, eggs, fowls, and vegetables from the farmhouses. From 6 to 9 chin-chucking, not actually upon the parade and the terrace, but close by, among the trees, on the steps of houses, beside the pond, was an amusement in full flow. Many of the higglers were comely red-cheeked damsels who thought it fine thus to be noticed by the quality, and I suppose no harm came of it all, save a little pampering of the conceit and vanity of young girls, so that they might dream of gentlemen instead of yeomen, and aspire beyond their rank, instead of remembering the words of the catechism, to learn and labor to do their duty in their own station of life, to attract the attention of a dozen young fellows, to have them following one about, even though one carried a basket full of eggs for sale, to listen to their compliments, to endure that chin-chucking. I suppose these things were to the taste of the girls, because, as Cicely told me, there was great competition among them who should carry the basket to the wells. Now Master Will was quite at home, from his village experiences, with this pastime, and speedily fell in with it, to the annoyance and discomfiture of the London beaux and fribbles. For still acting upon the principles that Epsom was his own parish, the village where he was sultan, great bashaw, hayduck, or grand seigneur, he at once took upon himself the right of paying these attentions to any or all of the damsels, without reference to previous preferences. This, which exasperated the fair higglers, drove the beau nearly mad. Yet, because he was so strong and his cudgel was so thick, none durst interfere. I have since thought, in reflecting over poor Will's history, that there are very few positions in life more dangerous to a young man than that of the only son of a country squire, to have no tastes for learning and polite society, and to live constantly on the estate. For among the rough farmers and laborers there can be no opposition or public feeling upon the conduct, however foolish and ungoverned, of such a young man. The rustics and clowns are his very humble servants, nay, almost his slaves. They tremble at his frown. If he lifts his stick they expect a cudgeling. As for the women and girls of the village, the poor things are simply honored by a nod and a word. The estate will be his, the fields will be his, the cottages his. The hares, rabbits, partridges, pheasants will be his. Even the very men and women will be his, nay, are his already. Wherever he goes he is saluted. Even in the church, the people rise to do him reverence. Hats are doffed and reverence paid if he walks the fields, or rides upon the roads. Every day, supposing he is so unhappy as to remain always upon his own estate, he is made to feel his greatness until he comes to believe, like King Louis Roman 15, himself, that there is no one in the world but must bow to his order, nothing that he desires but he must have. And speaking with the respect due to my benefactors, I think that Sir Robert, a man himself of singular good feeling and high breeding, was greatly to blame in not sending his son to travel, or in some way to make him mix with his equals and superiors. For such a character as Will's is formed insensibly. A man does not become selfish and boorish all at once. Therefore his parents did not notice, until it was forced upon them, what all the world deplored, the self-will and boorishness of their only son. To the last I think that Lady Levitt looked upon him as a young man of excellent heart, though stubborn. "You shall marry me," he had said. Therefore it was war to the death, because, as you all know, I could not possibly marry him. It was no secret at Epsom that this young autocrat had said those words. In fact, he used them in public, insulting Harry Temple upon the very terrace before all the company. "I warn you," he said, "keep away from Kitty, she's going to be my wife. I've told her so, therefore hands off." "Why, Will," Harry replied good-naturedly, "what if she refuses?" "She shan't refuse, I've said she shall marry me and she shall," he replied. "Refuse, it's only her whimsical tricks. All fillies are alike, hands off, Master Harry." "Why," cried Peggy Baker, "what a pretty, genteel speech to be sure. Oh, Mr. Levitt, happy is the woman who will be your wife. Such kindness of disposition, such sweetness, such gallantry, such sensibility." "I know what you mean," said Will, swearing a big oath. "And I don't value your words nor your opinion. No, not a brass farden, no more than I value your powder and your paint and your patches. You're all alike, blacksmith Sue is worth 100 of ye." Peggy burst out laughing, and Will strode away. He did not like to be laughed at, yet could not help being intolerably rude. When I found that Will, although he made himself the laughing-stock, and the terror of the place, ceased to molest me, I was more easy in my mind. Certainly, it would not have been pleasant to walk on the terrace, or even to go to the assembly, if one had feared to meet this rough and bearish inamorado, who might have insulted one, or a gentleman with one, in the most intolerable manner. However, the evening was generally a safe time, because then he loved to sit in a tavern playing all fours over a pipe, and a tankard with any country parson, or even any town tradesman, who would share his beer and be complacent with his moods. This was worse than the case of Harry Temple, because, as I have said before, I could not hope, whatever I did, to bring him to reason. Sometimes I thought, but wildly, of Dr. Powlett's establishment. Suppose that the whole force of the house had succeeded in putting him into chains and a strait waistcoat, which was certainly doubtful. Besides, so wicked a thing could not be done twice. What assurance had I of good behavior on release? He would promise. Will was always ready to promise, having no more regard to truth than an orangutan. But when he was free, with his cudgel in his hand, what would he not do? I have said that he was prodigiously strong, besides being fierce and masterful of aspect. This made men give way to him. Also he got a reputation for being stronger than perhaps he really was. For when, as continually happened, booths were put on the downs for wrestling, single-stick, quarterstaff, boxing, and other trials of skill and strength, Will would always go, sit out the whole games, and then challenge the victor, whom he always conquered, coming off the hero of the day. To be sure, it was whispered that the contest was generally arranged, by promise of half-a-crown, to be decided in favor of Will. It seems strange, but I suppose there are men who, for half-a-crown, will not only sell a fight, on which bets have been made, but also take a sound drubbing as well. And if he had a dispute with a gentleman, it was impossible for him to exchange 2 words without causing a dispute. He would immediately propose to settle the affair with cudgels or fists. Now a gentleman should be ready to fight a street bully or a light porter in London with any weapons, if necessary. But what sort of society would that be in which the gentleman would take off coat and wig and engage with fists or clubs on the smallest quarrel? He was so rude and overbearing that the company began to be positively afraid of going to the terrace or the assembly rooms, and indeed I think he would have driven the whole of the visitors away in a body, but for the timely interference of Lord Chudley and Sir Miles Lackington. It was the day after his open insult to Harry Temple, who could not call out the son of his former guardian and his old playfellow. Therefore these two resolved that there should be an end of this behavior. It was bruited abroad that some steps of a serious nature were going to be taken. There had been found a man, it was said, to bell the cat. It was even whispered that a prize fighter of stupendous strength, dexterity, and resolution had been brought down expressly from London in order to insult Will Levitt. Receive a challenge for single stick, or fists, or quarterstaff, instantly accept it, and thereupon give the village bantamcock so mighty a drubbing that he would not dare again to show his face among the company. Indeed, I think that was the best thing which could have been done, and I sincerely wish they had done it. But Lord Chudley and Sir Miles would not treat a gentleman, even so great a cub and clown, with other than the treatment due to a gentleman. Therefore, they resolved upon an open and public expostulation and admonition, and mindful of the big cudgel, they broke the laws of the Wells, and put on their swords before they came together on the terrace, looking grave and stern, as becomes those who have duties of a disagreeable kind to perform. But to see the excitement of the company, they expected, I believe, nothing short of a battle between Lord Chudley and Sir Miles on the one hand, armed with swords, and Will on the other, grasping his trusty cudgel. The cudgel in his hands, against any two combatants, would have been a mighty awkward weapon, but fortunately gentlemen of Will's kind entertain a healthy repugnance to cold steel. It was about 12 o'clock in the forenoon, when Will the Masterful, forcing his way, shoulders first, among the crowd, found himself brought up short by these two gentlemen. Round them were gathered a circle of bystanders, which increased rapidly till it was 20 or 30 deep. "Now then," he cried, "what is the meaning of this? Let's pass, will ye, lord or no lord?" As Lord Chudley made no reply, Will, growling that a freeborn Englishman was as good as a lord or a baronet in the public way, tried to pass through them. Then he was seized by the coat-collar by Sir Miles, whose arm was as strong as his own. "Hark ye," said the baronet, "we want a few words with you, young cub." Will lifted his head in amazement. Here was a man quite as strong as himself, who dared to address him as a cub. "We find that you go about the Wells," continued the baronet, "which is a place of entertainment for ladies and gentlemen, insulting, pushing, and behaving with no more courtesy than if you were in your own stable-yard. Now, sirrah, were it not for the respect we have for your father, we should make short work of you." "Make short work of me," cried Will, red in the face and brandishing his cudgel. "Make short work of me." "Certainly, do not think we shall fight you with sticks, and if you make the least gesture with that club of yours, I shall have the pleasure of running you through with my sword." Contrary to the rules of the Wells, both gentlemen, as I have said, wore their swords on this occasion, and here Sir Miles touched his sword hilt. "And now, sir, take a word of advice. Try to behave like a gentleman, or, upon my word of honor, you shall be driven out of the Wells with a horsewhip by the hands of the common grooms of the place, your proper companions." Will swore prodigiously, but he refrained from using his cudgel. Indeed, the prospect of cold steel mightily cooled his courage. "And a word from me, sir," said Lord Chudley, speaking low. "You have dared to make public use of a certain young lady's name. I assure you, upon the honor of a peer, that if you presume to repeat this offense, or if you in any way assert a claim to that lady's favor, I will make you meet me as one gentleman should meet another." Will looked from one to the other. Both men showed that they meant what they promised. Sir Miles, with a careless smile, had in his eye a look of determination. Lord Chudley, with grave face and set lip, seemed a man quite certain to carry out his promise. Will had nothing to say, he was like one dumbfounded, therefore he swore. This is the common refuge of many men for all kinds of difficulties, doubts, and dangers. Some rogues go swearing to the gallows. Men call them insensible and callous, whereas I believe that these wretches are simply incapable of expressing emotion in any other way. Swearing, with them, stands for every emotion. The divine gift of speech, by which it was designed that men should express their thoughts, and so continually lead upwards their fellow creatures, become in their case a vehicle for profane ejaculation, so that they are little better than the monkeys on the branches. Will therefore swore vehemently. This made no impression upon his assailants. He therefore swore again. He then asked what sort of treatment this was for a gentleman to receive. Sir Miles reminded him that he had offended against the good manners expected of gentlemen at a watering place, and that he could no longer fairly be treated as belonging to the polite class. "Indeed," he explained, "we have gravely considered the matter, my lord and myself, and have come to the conclusion that although, for the sake of your most worthy father, we were ready to admonish as a gentleman, though in this open and public manner as the offense required, yet we cannot consider your case to be deserving of any better treatment than that of a common, unruly porter, carter, or laboring man, who must be brought to his senses by reason of blows, cuffs, and kicks. Know, then, that although this terrace is open to all who comport themselves with civility, decency, and consideration for others, it is no place for brawlers, strikers, and disturbers of the peace. Wherefore, 4 stout men, or if that is not enough, 6, will be told off to drive you from the terrace whenever you appear again upon it armed with that great stick, or upon the least offer to fight any gentleman of the company. I believe, sir, that you are no fool, and that you perfectly understand what we mean, and that we do mean it. Wherefore, be advised in time, and if you do not retreat altogether from the wells, be persuaded to study the customs of polite society. This was a long speech for Sir Miles, but it was delivered with an authority and dignity which made me regret that such good abilities should have been thrown away at the gaming table. Will swore again at this. Then, observing that many of the bystanders were laughing, he brandished his cudgel, and talked of knocking out brains, breaking of necks, and so forth, until he was again reminded by Sir Miles, who significantly tapped the hilt of his sword, that Senior Stick was not to be allowed to reign at the wells. Then he hung his head and swore again. It will be best, sir, said Lord Chudley, that you come no more to the terrace or the assembly rooms with or without your cudgel. The downs are wide and open, there you will doubtless find room for walking, and an audience in the birds for these profane oaths, to which our ladies are by no means accustomed. Let me go then, he said sulkily. Odd rot it, get out of my way, some of you. He walked straight down the terrace, the people making way for him on either hand, with furious looks and angry gestures. He went straight to his stable, where he thrashed a groom for some imaginary offense. Thence he went to the King's Head, where he called for a tankard, and offered to fight the best man in the company or for 10 miles round, for £50 a side, with quarterstaff, single stick, or fists. Then he drank more beer, sat down and called for a pipe, smoked tobacco all the afternoon, and got drunk early in the evening. But he came no more to the terrace. And now, said Peggy Baker, I hope that we shall see Miss Nancy back again. Doubtless, my lord, the return of that lady, and the more frequent appearance of Miss Pleydell with her, will bring your lordship oftener from Durden's. I have already mentioned our poets at Epsom, and their biting epigrams. Here is another, which was sent to me at this time. Kitty, a nymph who fain would climb, but yet may tumble down. Her charms she tries with voice and eyes. First on a rustic clown, but bumpkin squire won't serve her turn. When gentle Harry woos her, so farewell Will, for Kitty still will laugh, although you lose her. Yet higher still than Hal or Will, her thoughts ambitious soared. Go Will and Hal, my promise shall be transferred to my lord. I suppose the verses were written at the request of Peggy Baker, but after all they did me very little harm, and indeed, nothing could do me either good or harm at Epsom any more, because my visit was brought to a sudden close by an event which, as will be seen, might have been most disastrous for us all. The selfishness and boorish behavior of Will Levitt not only kept us from walking on the terrace in the afternoon, but also kept poor Nancy at home altogether. She would either come to our lodgings and sit with me lamenting over her bumpkin brother, or she would sit at home when Sir Robert was testy and her ladyship querulous, throwing the blame of her son's rudeness sometimes upon her husband, who, she said, had never whipped the boy as he ought to have been whipped in accordance with expressed scripture orders strictly laid down, or upon Nancy, whose pert tongue and saucy ways had driven him from the hall to the kennel, or upon myself, who was so ungrateful, after all that had been done for me, as to refuse her son, in spite of all his protestations of affection. It was hard upon poor Nancy, the ordinary butt and victim of her brother's ill temper, that she should be taunted with being the cause of it. And one could not but think that had Madam been more severe with her son at the beginning, things might have gone better. When a mother allows her son from the very beginning to have all his own way, it is weak in the father to suffer it. But she must not then turn round when the mischief is done, and reproach her daughter, who took no part in the first mischief, with being the cause of it. Nor should she call a girl ungrateful for refusing to marry a man whose vices are so prominent and conspicuous that they actually prevent his virtues from being discerned. Beneath that smock frock, so to speak, that village rusticity, behind that blunt speech and rough manner, There may have been the sound, kind heart of a gentleman, but the girl could not take that for granted. The sequel proved indeed that she was right in refusing, even had she been free. For Will died, as he lived, a profligate and a drunkard of the village kind. So that even his poor mother was at last fain to acknowledge that he was a bad and wicked man, and but for some hope derived from his deathbed, would have gone in sorrow to her dying day. "I must say, Kitty," said Lady Levitt to me, "that I think a little kindness from you might work wonders with our Will, and he a boy of such a good heart." "He wants so much of me, madam," I replied. "With all respect, I cannot give him what he asks because I cannot love him." "He says, child, that you promised him." "Indeed, madam, I did not. I was in sorrow and lamentation over my father's death and my departure from kind friends, when first Harry and then Will came, and one after the other said words of which I took no heed. Yet when I saw them again, they both declared that I was promised to them. Now, madam, could a girl promise to two men within half an hour?" "I know not. Girls will do anything," said Lady Levitt bitterly. "Yet it passes my understanding to know how the two boys could be so mistaken, and yet you will take neither. What, would nothing serve you short of a coronet?" I made no reply. "Tell me then, girl, will Lord Chudley marry thee? It is a great condescension of him, and a great thing for a penniless young woman." "He will marry me, madam," I replied, blushing and thinking of what I had first to tell him. She sighed. "Well, I would he had cast his eyes on Nancy. Yet I say not, Kitty, that a coronet will be too heavy for thy head to wear. Some women are born to be great ladies. My Nancy must content herself with some simple gentleman. Go, my dear. I must try to persuade this headstrong boy to reason." "Persuade him, if you can, madam," I said, "to leave Epsom and go home. He will come to harm in this place. 2 or 3 of the gentlemen have declared that they will follow the example of Lord Chudley and Sir Miles Lackington, and wear swords, although that is against the rules of the Wells, in order to punish him for his rudeness should he venture again to shake his cudgel in the faces of the visitors, which he has done already to their great discomfiture." I know not if his mother tried to persuade him, but I do know that he did not leave Epsom, and that the evil thing which I had prophesied, not knowing how true my words might be, did actually fall upon him. This shows how careful one should be in foretelling disasters, even if they seem imminent. And indeed, having before one the experiences of maturity, it seems as if it would be well did a new order of prophets and prophetesses arise with a message of joy and comfort, instead of disaster and misery, such as the message which poor Cassandra had to deliver. Now, when my lord had given poor Will the warning of which I have told, he retired ashamed and angry, but impenitent, to those obscure haunts where tobacco is continually offered as incense to the gods of rusticity. Here he continued to sit, smoked pipes, drank beer, and cudgelled stableboys to his heart's content, while we, being happily quit of him, came forth again without fear. Nancy, however, assured me that something would happen before her brother, whose stubbornness and masterful disposition were well known to her, relinquished his pursuit and persecution of the woman on whom he had set his heart. "My dear," she said, "I know Will as you do of old. Was there ever a single thing which he desired that he did not obtain? Why, when he was a child and cried for the moon, they brought him a piece of green cheese, which they told him was cut from the moon on purpose for him to eat. Was he ever crossed in anything? Has there ever been a single occasion on which he gave up any enjoyment or desire out of consideration for another person? Rather, when he has gone among his equals, has he not become an object of scorn and hatred? He made no friends at school, nor any at Cambridge, from which place of learning he was, as you know, disgracefully expelled. The gentlemen of the county will not associate with him except on the hunting field. You know all this, Kitty. Think then, since he has made up his mind to marry a girl, since he has bragged about his condescension as he considers it, since he has promised his pot companions to bring home a wife, how great must be his rage and disappointment. He will do something, Kitty. He is desperate." "What, however, could he do? He came not near our lodgings, he made no sign of any evil intention, but he did not go away." "He is desperate," repeated Nancy. "He cares little about you, but he thinks of his own reputation. And my dear, do not think because Will, poor boy, is a sot and a clown that he does not think of his reputation. His hobby is to be thought a man who can and will have his own way. He has openly bragged about the country, and even among his boozing companions at Epsom, that he will marry you. Therefore, oh my dear, be careful. Go not forth alone or without a gentleman or two after dark, for I believe that Will would do anything for the sake of what he calls his honor. For Kitty, to be laughed at would be the death blow to his vanity. He knows that he is ignorant and boorish, but he consoles himself with the thought that he is strong. What, I repeated, being uneasy more than a little, could he do? At first I thought of asking Harry Temple quietly to watch over Will and bring me news if anything was in the wind, but that would not do either, because one could not ask Harry to act the part of a spy. Next, I thought that I had only to ask for a bodyguard of the young men at the Wells to get a troop for my protection, but what a presumption would this be? Finally, I spoke my fears to Sir Robert, begging him not to tell Madam what I had said. "Courage, Kitty," said Sir Robert Levitt. "Will is a clown, for which we have to thank our own indulgence. Better had it been to break 1,000 good ash saplings over his back than to see him as he is. Well, the wise man says, 'The father of a fool hath no joy,' yet Will is of gentle blood, and I cannot doubt that he will presently yield and go away patiently." "Have you asked him, sir?" "Child, I ask him daily, for his mother's sake and for Nancy's, to go away and leave us in peace. But I have no control over him. He doth but swear and call for more ale. His mother also daily visits him, and gets small comfort thereby. His heart is hard and against us all. Then, sir, if Mrs. Esther will consent, one cause of his discontent shall be removed, for we will go away to London, where he will not be able to find us." "Yes, Kitty," he replied. "That will be best, yet who would ever have thought I could wish our sweet tall Kitty to go away from us?" The sweet tall Kitty could not but burst out crying at such tenderness from her old friend and protector. "Forgive me, sir," I said, while he kissed me and patted my cheek as if I was a child again. "Forgive me, sir, that I cannot marry Will as he would wish." "Child," he exclaimed, starting to his feet in a paroxysm of passion. "God forgive me for saying so, but I would rather see a girl I loved in her grave than married to my son." We then held a consultation, Lord Chudley being of the party, and it was resolved that we should return to London without delay, and without acquainting any at the Wells with our intention, which was to be carried into effect as soon as we could get our things put together. In fact, in 2 days' time. So secret were our preparations that we did not even tell Nancy, and were most careful to let no suspicion enter the head of Cicely Crump, a town crier of the busiest and loudest, who was, besides, continually beset by the young gallants, seeking through her to convey letters, poems, and little gifts to me. Yet so faithful was the girl, as I afterwards found out, and so fond of me, that I might safely have trusted her with any secret. Soon after the event which I am now to relate, I took Cicely into my service as still-room maid. She remained with me for 4 years, being ever the same merry, faithful, and talkative wench. She then, by my advice, married the curate of the parish, to whom she made as good a wife as she had been a servant, and brought up 11 children, 4 of them being twins, in the fear of God and the love of duty. We were to depart on Friday, the evening being chosen so that Master Will should not be able to see us go. Lord Chudley and Sir Miles promised to ride with our coach all the way to London for protection. I have often remembered since that Friday is ever an unlucky day to begin upon. Had we made the day Thursday, for instance, we should have gotten safely away without the thing which happened. On Thursday afternoon, we repaired to the terrace as usual. I rather sad at thinking that my reign as Queen of the Wells would soon be over, and wondering whether the future could have any days in store for me so happy as those which a kind Providence had already bestowed upon me. There was to be a dance at 6, and a tea at 5. About 4 o'clock, Nancy and I, accompanied only by Mr. Stalabras, sauntered away from the terrace and took the road leading to the downs. Nancy afterwards told me that she had noticed a carriage with 4 horses waiting under the trees between the terrace and the King's Head, which, on our leaving the crowd, slowly followed us along the road. But she thought nothing of this at the time. Mr. Stalabras, with gallant and consequential air, ambled beside us, his hat under his arm, his snuff-box in his left hand, and his cane dangling from his right wrist. He was, as usual, occupied with his own poetry, which indeed, through the interest of the brewer's widow whom he subsequently married, seemed about to become the fashion. I thought then that it was splendid poetry, but I fear now that it must have been what Dr. Johnson once called a certain man's writing, terrible skimble-scamble stuff. In other words, poor Solomon Stalabras had the power of imitation, and would run you off rhymes as glibly as monkey can peel coconuts, according to the reports of travelers, quite in the style of Pope. Yet the curious might look in vain for any thought above the common, or any image which had not been used again and again. Such poets, though they hand down the lamp, do not, I suppose, greatly increase the poetic reputation of their country. It seems a pity, Mr. Stalabras, I was saying, that you, who are so fond of singing about the purling stream and the turtles cooing in the grove, do not know more about the familiar objects of the country. Here is this little flower, only a humble cranesbill, yet a beautiful flower. You do not, I engage, know its name. He did not. Observe again the spreading leaves of yonder great tree. You do not, I suppose, know its name. He did not. A common beech it was, yet as stately as any of those which may be seen near Farnham Royal or in Windsor Forest. And listen, there is a bird whose note I dare swear you do not know. He did not. Would you believe that it was actually the voice of the very turtle-dove of which he was so fond? The poet, he explained, not at all abashed by the display of so much ignorance. The poet should not fetter his mind with the little details of nature. He dwells in his thought remote from their consideration. A flower is to him a flower, which is associated with the grove and the purling stream. A shepherd gathers a posy of flowers for his nymph. A tree is a tree which stands beside the stream to shelter the swain and his goddess. The song of one bird is as good as the song of another, provided it melodiously echoes the sighs of the shepherd. As for... Here we were interrupted. The post-chaise drove rapidly up the road and overtook us. As we turned to look, it stopped, and two men jumped out of it, armed with cudgels. Nancy seized my arm. Kitty, Will is in the carriage. I will do Solomon Stalabras justice. He showed himself, though small of stature and puny of limb, as courageous as a lion. He was armed with nothing but his cane, but with this he flew upon the ruffians who rushed to seize me, and beat, struck, clung, and kicked in my defense. Nancy threw herself upon me and shrieked, crying that if they carried me away they should drag her too. While we struggled, I saw the evil face of Will looking out of the carriage. It was distorted by every evil passion. He cried to the men to murder Solomon. He threatened his sister to kill her unless she let go. He called to me that it would be the worse for me unless I came quiet. Then he sprang from the carriage himself, having originally purposed, I suppose, to take no part in the fray, and with his cudgel dealt Solomon such a blow upon his head that he fell senseless in the road. After this he seized Nancy, his own sister, dragged her from me, swore at the men for being cowardly lubbers, and while they threw me into the carriage, he hurled his sister shrieking and crying on the prostrate form of the poor poet, and sprang into the carriage after me. Run, he cried to the two men, off with you both different ways. If you get caught, it will be the worse for you. We were halfway up the hill which leads from the town to the downs. In fact, we were not very far above the doctor's house, but there was a wind in the road, so that had his men been looking out of his doors they could not have seen what was being done, though they might have heard almost on the terrace the cries, the dreadful imprecations, and the shrieks of Nancy and myself. They had thrown me upon the seat with such violence that I was breathless for a few moments, as well as sick and giddy with the dreadful scene. It lasted but half a minute, which I had witnessed. Yet as Will leaped in after me and gave the word to drive on, I saw lying in the dust of the road the prostrate and insensible form of poor Solomon and my faithful, tender Nancy, who had so fought and wrestled with the villains, not with any hope that she could beat them off, but in order to gain time, lying half over the body of the poet, half on the open road. Alas, the road at this time was generally deserted. There was no one to rescue, though beyond the tall elms upon the right lay the gardens and park of Durdens, where my lord was walking at that moment, perhaps, meditating upon his wretched Kitty. As for my companion, his face resembled that of some angry devil, moved by every evil passion at once. If I were asked to depict the worst face I ever saw, I should try to draw the visage of this poor boy. He could not speak for passion. He was in such a rage that his tongue clave to the roof of his mouth. He could not even swear. He could only splutter. For a while he sat beside me ejaculating at intervals disjointed words, while his angry eyes glared about the coach, and his red cheeks flamed with wrath. The downs were quite deserted. Not even a shepherd was in sight. We drove along a road which I knew well, a mere track across the grass. The smooth turf was easy for the horses, and we were traveling at such a pace that it seemed impossible for anyone to overtake us. My heart sank, yet I bade myself keep up courage. With this wild beast at my side, it behoved me to show no sign of terror. Every woman has got two weapons, one provided by nature, the other by art. The first is the one which King Solomon had ever in his mind when he wrote the book of Proverbs, which should be the guide and companion of every young man. Certainly he had so many wives that he had more opportunities than fall to the lot of most husbands, who have only the experience of one, of knowing the power of a woman's tongue. He says he would rather dwell in the wilderness than with an angry woman, in the corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman. Yet the last chapter of the book is in praise of the wise woman. I had, therefore, my tongue. Next I had a pair of scissors, so that if my fine gentleman attempted the least liberty, I could, and would, give him such a stab with the sharp points as would admonish him to good purpose. But mostly, I relied upon my tongue, knowing of old that with this weapon Will was easily discomfited. Presently, the cool air of the downs blowing upon his cheeks, Will became somewhat soothed, and his ejaculations became less like angry words used as interjections. I sat silent, taking no notice of what he said, and answering nothing to any of his wild speeches. But be sure that I kept one eye upon the window, ready to shriek if any passerby appeared. The angry interjections settled down into sentences, and Will at last became able to put some of his thoughts into words. He began a strange, wild, rambling speech, during which I felt somewhat sorry for him. It was such a speech as an Indian savage might have made when roused to wrath by the loss of his squaw. He bade me remember that he had known me from infancy, that he had always been brought up with me. I had therefore a first duty to perform in the shape of gratitude to him, for being a child with him in the same village. Next he informed me that having made up his mind to marry me, nothing should stop him, because nothing ever did stop him in anything he proposed to do, and if anyone tried to stop him, he always knocked down that man first, and when he had left him for dead, he then went and did the thing. This, he said, was well known. Very well, then. Did I dare then, he asked, knowing as I did full well this character of his for resolution, to fly in the face of that knowledge and throw him over? What made the matter, he argued, a case of the blackest ingratitude, was that I had thrown him over for a lord, a poor, chicken-hearted, painted lord, whom he, for his own part, could knock down at a single blow. He would now, therefore, show me what my new friends were worth. Here I was, boxed up in the carriage with him, safe and sound, not a soul within hail, being driven merrily across country to a place he knew of, where I should find a house, a parson, and a prayer book. With these before me I might, if I pleased, yelp and cry for my lord and his precious friend, Sir Miles Lackington. They would be far enough away, with their swords and their mincing ways. When I was married, they might come and— what was I laughing at? I laughed, in fact, because I remembered another weapon. As a last resource, I could proclaim to the clergyman that I was already a wife, the wife of Lord Chudley. I knew enough of the clergy to be certain that although a man might be here, and there found among them capable of marrying a woman against her will, just as men are found among them who, to please their patrons, will drink with them, go cock-fighting with them, and in every other way forget the sacred duties of their calling, yet not one among them all, however bad, would dare to marry again a woman already married. Therefore I laughed. A London profligate would, perhaps, have got a man to personate a clergyman, but this wickedness, I was sure, would not enter into the head of simple Will Levitt. It was as much as he could devise, and that was surely a good deal, to bribe some wretched country curate to be waiting for us at our journey's end, to marry us on the spot. When I understood this, I laughed again, thinking what a fool Will would look when he was thwarted again. Zounds, madam, I see no cause for laughing. I laugh, Will, I said, because you are such a fool. As for you, unless you order your horses' heads to be turned round, and drive me instantly back to Epsom, you will not laugh but cry. To this he made no reply, but whistled. Now to whistle when a person gives you serious advice, is in Kent considered a contemptuous reply. Ah, he went on, sly as you were, I have been too many for you. It was you who set the two bullies, your great lord and your baronet, on me with their swords, made all the people laugh at me. You shall pay for it all. It was you set Nancy crying and scolding upon me enough to give a man a fit. It was you, I know, set my father on to me. Says if he cannot cut me off with a shilling, he will sell the timber, ruin the estate, and let me starve so long as he lives. Let un, I say, all of you do your worst. Honest Will Levitt will do what he likes and have what he likes. Bulldog Will, Holdfast Will, Tear Will, by the Lord, there isn't a man in the country can get the better of him. Oh, I know your ways, wait till I've married you. Then butter won't melt in your mouth. Then it will be, dear Will, kind Will, sweet Will, best of husbands and of men. Oh, I know what you are well enough. Why, after all, what is one woman that she should set herself above other women? Take off your powder and your patches and your hoops, how are you better than blacksmith Sue? Answer me that. And why do I take all this trouble about you, to anger my father and spite my mother, when blacksmith Sue would make as good a wife. Aye, 1,000 times better. Because she can bake and brew and shoe a horse and mend a cracked crown and fight a gamecock and teach a ferret and train a terrier or a bullpup, whereas you, what are you good for but to sit about and look grand and come over the fellows with your make-pretense, false, lying, whimsy-flimsy ways, your smilin' looks when a lord is at your heels, and your oh fie, Will, if it's only an old friend. Why I say, because I've told my friends that I'm going to bring you home my wife and my honor's at stake, because I am one as will have his will spite of 'em all. Because I don't love you not one bit since I found you out for what you are, a false, jilted jade, and I value the little finger of Sue more than your whole body, tall as you are and fine as you think yourself. Oh, by the Lord. I am sorry I cannot give the whole of his speech, which was too coarse and profane to be written down for polite eyes to read. Suffice it to say that it included every form of wicked word or speech known to the rustics of Kent, and that he threatened me, in the course of it, with every kind of cruelty that he could think of, counting as nothing a horsewhipping every day until I became cheerful. Now, to horsewhip your wife every day in order to make her cheerful seems like starving your horse in order to make him more spirited, or to flog an ignorant boy in order to make him learned, or to kick your dog in order to make him love you. Perhaps he did not mean quite all that he said, but one cannot tell, because his friends were chiefly in that rank of life where it is considered a right and honorable thing to beat a wife, cuff a son, and kick a daughter, and even the coarsest boor of a village will have obedience from the wretched woman at his beck and call. I think that Will would have belabored his wife with the greatest contentment, and as a pious duty, in order to make her satisfied with her lot, cheerful over her duties, and merry at heart at the contemplation of so good a husband. A wife, a dog, and a walnut tree, the harder you flog them, the better they be. There are plenty of Solomon's proverbs in favor of flogging a child, but none, that I know of, which recommend the flogging of a wife. Blacksmith Sam, Will said, in his own village, the father of the incomparable Sue, used this method to tame his wife, with satisfactory results, and Pharaoh, his own keeper, was at that very time engaged upon a similar course of discipline with his partner. What he explained, is good for such as those women is good for all. Beat 'em and thrash 'em till they follow to heel like a well-bred retriever. Keep the stick over 'em till such times as they become as meek as an old cow, and as obedient as a sheep-dog. While he was still pouring forth these maxims for my information and encouragement, my heart began to beat violently, because I heard, distantly at first, the hoofs of horses behind us. Will went on, hearing and suspecting nothing, growing louder and louder in his denunciation of women, and the proper treatment of them. The hoofs drew nearer. Presently they came alongside. I looked out. One on each side of our carriage, there rode Lord Chudley and Sir Miles Lackington. But I laughed no longer, for I saw before me the advent of some terrible thing, and a dreadful trembling seized me. My lord's face was stern, and Sir Miles, for the first time in my recollection, was grave and serious, as one who hath a hard duty to perform. So mad was poor headstrong Will that he neither heard them nor, for a while, saw them, but continued his swearing and raving. They called aloud to the postilions to stop the horses. This it was that roused Will, and he sprang to his feet with a yell of rage, and thrusting his head out of the window, bawled to the boys to drive faster, faster. They whipped and spurred their horses. My lord said nothing, but rode on, keeping up with the carriage. "Stop," cried Sir Miles. "Go on," cried Will. Sir Miles drew a pistol, and deliberately cocked it. "If you will not stop," he cried, holding his pistol to the postboy's head, "I will fire." "Go on," cried Will, "go on, he dares not fire." The fellow, I knew him for a stable boy whose life at the hall had been one long series of kicks, cuffs, abuse, and horsewhippings at the hands of his young master, ducked his head between his shoulders, and put up his elbows, as if that which had so often protected him when Will was enforcing discipline by the help of Father Stick would avail him against a pistol shot. But he obeyed his master, mostly from force of habit, and spurred his horse. Sir Miles changed the direction of the pistol, and leaning forward, discharged the contents in the head of the horse which the boy was riding. The poor creature bounded forward and fell dead. There was a moment of confusion. The flying horses stumbled and fell, the boys were thrown from their saddles. The carriage was stopped suddenly. Then, what followed happened all in a moment. Yet it is a moment which to me is longer than any day of my life, because the terror of it has never left me, and because in dreams it often comes back to me. Ah, what a prophetess was Nancy, when she said that some dreadful thing would happen before all was over, unless Will went away. Sir Miles and my lord sprang to their feet. Will, with a terrible oath, leaped forth from the carriage. For a moment he stood glaring from one to the other like a wild beast brought to bay. He was a wild beast. Then he raised his great cudgel and rushed at my lord. "You," he cried, "you are the cause of it, I will beat out your brains." Lord Chudley leaped lightly aside, and avoided the blow which would have killed him had it struck his head. Then I saw the bright blade in his hand glisten for a moment in the sunlight, and then Will fell backwards with a cry, and lay lifeless on the green turf, while my lord stood above him, drops of red blood trickling down his sword. "I fear, my lord," said Sir Miles, "that you have killed him. Fortunately, I am witness that it was in self-defense." "You have killed him, you have killed my master," cried the stable boy, whose left arm, which was broken by his fall from the horse, hung helpless at his side. "You have killed the best master in all the world. Lord or no lord, you shall hang." He rushed with his one hand to seize the slayer of his master, this poor faithful slave, whose affections had only grown firmer with every beating. Sir Miles caught him by the coat collar and dragged him back. "Quiet, fool, attend to your master, he is not dead yet." He looked dead. The rage was gone out of his eyes, which were closed, and the blood had left the cheeks, which were pallid. Poor Will never looked so handsome as when he lay, to all seeming, dead. Lord Chudley looked on his prostrate form with a kind of stern sadness. The taking of life, even in such a cause and in self-defense, is a dreadful thing. Like Lamech, who also might have been defending his own life, he had slain a man to his wounding, and a young man to his hurt. "Kitty," he said in a low voice, taking my hand, "this is a grievous day's work. Yet I regret it not, since I have saved your honor." "My lord," I replied, "I had the saving of that in my own hands. But you have rescued me from a wild beast, whose end I grieve over, because I knew him when he was yet an innocent boy." "Come," said Sir Miles, "we must take measures. Here, fellows, come, lift your master." The two boys, with his help, lifted Will, who, as they moved him, groaned heavily, into the carriage. "Now," said Sir Miles, "one of you get inside, lift his head. If but that is impossible, you come across water, pour a little into his mouth. The other mount, and drive home as quickly as you can." I bethought me of my friend the mad doctor, and bade them take their master to his house, which was, as I have said, on the road between the town and the downs, so that he might be carried there quietly, without causing an immediate scandal in the town. The fellows were now quite obedient and subdued. Sir Miles, who seemed to know what was to be done, made some sort of splint with a piece of poor Will's cudgel, for the broken arm, which he tied up roughly, and bade the boy be careful to get attended to as soon as his master was served. In that class of life, as is well known, wounds, broken bones, and even the most cruel surgical operations, are often endured with patience which would equal the most heroic courage, if it were not due to a stupid insensibility. The most sensitive of men are often the most courageous, because they know what it is they are about to suffer. However, they did as they were told, and presently drove back, the third horse following with a rope. Then we were left alone, with the blood upon the grass and the dead horse lying beside us. Sir Miles took my lord's sword from him, wiped it on the turf, and restored it to him. "Come," he said, "we must consider what to do." "There is nothing to do," said Lord Chudley, "except to take Miss Pleydell home again." "Pardon me, my lord," Sir Miles interposed. "If ever I saw mischief written on any man's face, it was written on the face of that boy. A brave lad, too, and would have driven to the death at his master's command." "How can he do harm?" I asked. "Why, Sir Miles, you are witness. You saw Will Levitt with his cudgel rush upon his lordship, who but drew in self-defense. I am another witness. I hope the simple words of such as you and I would be believed before the oath of a stable lad." "I suppose they would," he replied. "Meantime, there is the fact, known to all the company at the Wells, that both you and I, Lord Chudley, had publicly informed this unhappy young man that, under certain circumstances, we would run him through. The circumstances have happened, and we have run him through. This complication may be unfortunate as regards the minds of that pig-headed institution, a coroner's inquest." "Sir," cried my lord, "do you suppose, would you have me believe, that this affair might be construed into anything but an act of self-defense?" "I do indeed," he replied gravely, "and so deeply do I feel it, that I would counsel a retreat into some place where we shall not be suspected, for such a time as may be necessary. If the worst happens and the man dies, your lordship may surrender yourself, but in London, not to a country bench. If the man recovers, well and good, you can go abroad again. At first my lord would hear nothing of such a plan. Why should he run away? Was it becoming for a man to fly from the laws of his country? Then I put in a word, pointing out that it was one thing for a case to be tried before a jury of ignorant, prejudiced men upon an inquest, and another thing altogether for the case to be tried by a dispassionate and unprejudiced jury. I said, too, that away from this place, the circumstances of the case, the brutal assault upon Solomon Stalabras, whose ribs, it appeared, were broken, as well as his collarbone, the ferocious treatment of Nancy by her own brother, and my forcible abduction in open daylight, would certainly be considered provocation enough for anything, and a justification, combined with the other circumstances of the homicide, if unhappily Will should die. This moved my lord somewhat. Where, he asked, could he go so as to lie perdu for a few days or a few weeks if necessary? I have thought upon that, replied Sir Miles, looking at me with a meaning eye, but I blushed and turned pale and reddened again. I have just now thought of a plan. Your lordship has been there once already, I mean the rules of the fleet. Here will I find you lodgings, where no one will look for you. Where, if you please to lie hidden for a while, you may do so in perfect safety. Where you may have any society you please, from a baronet out at elbows to a baker in rags, or no society at all, if you please to lie quiet. I like not the place, said his lordship. I have been there, it is true, once, and it was once too often. Find me another place. I know no other, Sir Miles replied. You must be in London, you must be in some place where no one will suspect you. As for me, I will stay near you, but not with you. There will be some noise over this affair. It will be well for us to be separated, yet not so far but that I can work for you. Come, my lord, be reasonable. The place is dirty and noisy, but what signify dirt and noise when safety is concerned? He wavered. The recollection of the place was odious to him, yet the case was pressing. He gave way. Have it, he said, your own way, Kitty. He took my hand. Hopeless as is my case, desperate as is my condition, I am happy in having rescued you, no matter at what cost. Your lordship's case is not so hopeless as mine, said Sir Miles. Yet I, too, am happy in having helped to rescue this, the noblest creature in the world. The tears were in my eyes as these two men spoke of me in such terms. How could I deserve this worship? By what act, or thought, or prayer, could I raise myself to the level where my lord's imagination had planted me? O love divine, since it makes men and women long to be angels. I mean, Sir Miles continued bluntly, that since your lordship has found favor in her eyes, your case cannot be hopeless. Lord Chudley raised my hand to his lips, with a sadness in his eyes of which I alone could discern the cause. Gentlemen, I cried, we waste the time in idle compliments. Mount and ride off as quickly as you may. As for me, it is but 3 miles across the downs. I have no fear, I shall meet no one. Mount, I say, and ride to London without more ado. They obeyed, they left me standing alone. As my eyes turned from following them, they lighted on the pool of blood, Will's blood, which reddened the turf, and upon the poor dead horse. Then I hastened back across the downs. It was a clear, bright evening, the sun yet pretty high. The time was about 5:30. Before long the minuets would be beginning in the assembly rooms, yet Lady Levet would know, I hoped that she already knew, the dreadful wickedness of her son. Would not, indeed, all the company know it? Would not the assault on Mr. Stalabras and on Nancy be noised abroad? Indeed, the news had already sped abroad. Long before I reached the edge of the downs, I became aware of a crowd of people. They consisted of the whole company, all the visitors at Epsom, who came forth, leaving the public tea and the dance, to meet the girl who had been thus carried away by force. Harry Temple came forward as soon as I was in sight to meet me. He was very grave. Kitty, he said, this is a bad day's work. How is Will? You have seen Will. I fear he is already dead. The doctor to whom you sent him declares that he is dying fast. His mother is with him. Oh, Harry, I sighed. I gave him no encouragement. There was not the least encouragement to believe that I would marry him. No one thinks you did, Kitty, not even his mother. Yet others have been carried away by admiration of your charms to think. Oh, my charms, my charms. Harry, with poor Will at death's door, let us at least be spared the language of compliment. By this time we had reached the stream of people. Among them, I am happy to say, was not Peggy Baker. She at least did not come out to gaze upon her unhappy rival, for whose sake one gallant gentleman lay bleeding to death, and 2 others were riding away to hide themselves until the first storm should be blown over. The rest parted right and left and made a lane through which we passed in silence. As I went through, I heard voices whispering, "Where's Lord Chudley? Where's Sir Miles? How pale she looks!" And so forth, comments of the crowd which has no heart, no pity, no sympathy. It came out today to look upon a woman to whom a great insult had been offered with as little pity as tomorrow it would go to see a criminal flogged from Newgate to Tyburn, or a woman whipped at Bridewell, or a wretched thief beaten before the alderman, or a batch of rogues hanged. They came to be amused. Amusement, to most people, is the contemplation of other folks' sufferings. If tortures were to be introduced again, if, as happened, we are told in the time of Nero, Christians could be wrapped in pitch and then set fire to, thus becoming living candles, I verily believe the crowd would rush to see, and would enjoy the spectacle the more, the longer the sufferings of the poor creatures were prolonged. Solomon Stalabras, Harry told me, was comfortably put into bed, his ribs being set and his collarbone properly put in place. There was no doubt that he would do well. Nancy, too, was in bed, sick with the fright she had received, but not otherwise much hurt. Mrs. Esther was wringing her hands and crying at home, with Cicely to look after her. Sir Robert and Lady Levitt were at the doctor's. It was, I have said, the same doctor who had undertaken the temporary charge of Harry Temple. As we drew near the house, I observed that most of the people remained behind upon the downs in hopes of seeing the return of Lord Chudley, in which hope they were disappointed. Harry became silent. "Come, Harry," I said, reading his thoughts. "You must forgive me for saving your life or from preventing you from killing Lord Chudley. Be reasonable, dear Harry." He smiled. "I have forgiven you long since," he replied. "You acted like a woman, that is, you did just what you thought best at the moment. But I cannot, and will not, forgive the man with his impudent smile and his buckets of water." "Nay, Harry," I said, "he acted according to his profession. Come with me to the house. I cannot even go to Mrs. Esther until I have seen or heard about poor Will." The doctor was coming from the sick man's chamber when we came to the house. They had placed Will in one of the private rooms, away from the dreadful gallery, where the madmen were chained to the wall. With him were Lady Levitt and Sir Robert. The doctor coughed, in his most important manner. "Your obedient servant, Miss Pleydell, sir, your most obedient, humble servant. You are come, no doubt, to inquire after the victim of this most unhappy affair. Poor Mr. William Levitt, I grieve to say, is in a most precarious condition. Can nothing save him, O doctor?" "Nothing can save him, young lady," he replied, "but a miracle. That miracle, I call it nothing short, is sometimes granted by beneficent providence to youth and strength only when, I say only when, their possession is aided by the very highest medical skill that the country can produce. I say the very highest, no mere pretender will avail. Indeed, doctor, we have that skill, I doubt not, in yourself." "I say nothing," he bowed and spread his hands. "I say nothing. It is not for me to speak." "And, sir," said Harry, "you are doubtless aware that Sir Robert is a gentleman of a considerable estate, and that, in fact, you may expect." "Sir Robert," he replied, with a smile which speedily, in spite of all his efforts, broadened into a grin of satisfaction, "has already promised that no expense shall be spared, no honorarium be considered too large if I give him back his son. Yet we can but do our best. Science is strong, but a poke of cold steel in the inwards is, if you please, stronger still." "Will you let me see Sir Robert?" I asked. The doctor stole back to the room, and presently Sir Robert came forth. He kissed me on the forehead, while his tears fell upon my head. "My dear," he said, "I ask your pardon in the name of my headstrong son. We have held an honorable name for 500 years and more. In all that time no deed so dastardly has been attempted by any one of our house. Yet the poor wretch hath paid dearly for his wickedness." "Oh, sir," I cried, "there is no reason why you should speak of forgiveness, who have ever been so kind to me. Poor will repent and be very good when he recovers." "I think," said his father sadly, "that he will not recover. Go, child. Ask not to see the boy's mother, because women are unreasonable in their grief, and she might perchance say things of which she would afterwards be ashamed. Go to Mrs. Pimpernel and tell her of thy safety." This was, indeed, all that could be done. Yet after allaying the terrors and soothing the agitated spirits of Mrs. Esther, whose imagination had conjured up, already, the fate of Clarissa, and who saw in headstrong Will another Lovelace, without, to be sure, the graces and attractions of that dreadful monster, I went to inquire after my gallant little poet. He was lying on his bed, with orders not to move, and wrapped up like a baby. I thanked him for his brave defense, which I said would have been certainly efficacious, had it not been for the cowardly blow on the back of his head. I further added that no man in the world could have behaved more resolutely or with greater courage. "This day," he said, "has been the reward for a poet's devotion. In those bowers, Miss Kitty, when first we met, the bower was the Fleet Market, beside that stream, the Fleet Ditch, where the woodland choir was held, the clack of the poultry about to be killed, and the playful lambs frisked, on their way to the butcher's of Newgate Street. I dared to love a goddess who was as much too high for me as ever Beatrice was for her Italian worshipper. I refer not to the disparity of birth, because, though brought up in a hosier's shop, the muse, you have acknowledged, confers nobility. An attorney is by right of his calling styled a gentleman, but a poet, by right of his genius, is equal of even of Lord Chudley." "Surely, dear sir," I replied, "no one can refuse the highest title of distinction to a gentleman of merit and genius. But I think," he went on, "of that disparity which consists in virtue and goodness. That can never be removed. How happy, therefore, ought I to be in feeling that I have helped to preserve an angel from the hands of those barbarous monsters who would have violated such a sanctuary. What are these wounds? A broken rib, a cracked collar bone, a bump on the back of the head. I wish they had been broken legs and arms in your service." I laughed, but this devotion, more than half of it being real, touched my heart. The little poet, conceited, vain, sometimes foolish, was ennobled, not by his genius, of which he thought so much, but by his great belief in goodness and virtue. Women should be humble when they remember that if a good man loves them, it is not in very truth the woman, who is a poor creature full of imperfections, that they love, but the soul, the noble, pure, exalted soul, as high as their own grandest conception of goodness and piety, which they believe to be in her. How can we rise to so great a height? How can we, without abasement, pretend to such virtue? How can we be so wicked and so cruel as, after marriage, to betray to our husbands the real littleness of our souls? As my Lord believed me to be, so might I then, I prayed, rise to heaven in very truth, and even soar to higher flights. Now when I reached home, a happy thought came to me. I knew the name of Solomon's latest patron, the brewer's widow. I sat down and wrote her a letter. I said that I thought it my simple duty to inform her, although I had not the honor of her friendship, that the poet whom she had distinguished with her special favor and patronage was not in a position to pay her his respects, either by letter, or by verse, or in person, being at that time ill in bed with ribs and other bones broken in defense of a lady. And to this I added, so that she might not grow jealous, which one must always guard against in dealing with women, that he was walking with two ladies, not one, and that the gallantry he showed in defense of her who was attacked was so great that not even a lover could have displayed more courage for his mistress than he did for this lady myself, who was promised to another gentleman. Nor was it, I added, until he was laid senseless on the field that the ravishers were able to carry off the lady, who was immediately afterwards rescued by two friends of the poet, Lord Chudley and Sir Miles Lackington. This crafty letter, which was all true, and yet designedly exaggerated, as when I called my Lord Solomon's friend, produced more than the effect which I desired. For the widow, who was in London, came down to Epsom the next day in a carriage and four to see the hero. Now she was still young, and comely as well as rich. Therefore, when she declared to him that no woman could resist such a combination of genius and heroic courage, Solomon could only reply that he would rush into her arms with all a lover's rapture, as soon as his ribs permitted an embrace. In short, within a month they were married at Epsom Church, and Solomon, though he wrote less poetry in after years than his friends desired, lived in great comfort and happiness, having a wife of sweet temper, who thought him the noblest and most richly endowed of men, and a brewery whose vats produced him an income far beyond his wants, though these expanded as time went on. As for Nancy, she was little hurt, save for the fright and the shame of it. Yet her brother, the cause of all, was lying dangerously wounded, and she could not for very pity speak her mind upon his wickedness. The company, I learned from Sicily, were greatly moved about it. The public tea had been broken up in confusion, while all sallied forth to the scene of the outrage. Nor was the assembly resumed when it was discovered that Will Levitt had been run through the body by Lord Chudley, and was now lying at the point of death. In the morning Cicely went early to inquire at the doctor's. Alas, Will was in a high fever, Lady Levitt had been sitting with him all night, it was not thought that he would live through the day. I put on my hood and went to see Nancy. "Oh, my dear, dear Kitty," she cried. Sure, we shall all go distracted. You have heard what they say. Poor Will is in a bad way indeed. The fever is so high that the doctor declares his life to be in hourly danger. He is delirious, and in his dreams he knows not what he says, so that you would fancy him among his dogs or in his stables, where indeed it hath been his chief delight to dwell, or with the rustics with whom he would drink. It is terrible, my father says, that one so near his end, who must shortly appear before his Maker, should thus blaspheme and swear such horrid oaths. If we could only ensure him half an hour of sense, even with pain, so that the clergyman might exhort him. Alas, our Will hath led so shocking a life, my dear, I know more of his ways than he thinks, that I doubt his conscience and his heart are hardened. Oh, Kitty, to think that yesterday we were happy, and that this evil thing had not befallen us. And now I can never go abroad again without thinking that the folk are saying, there goes the sister of the man who was killed while trying to carry off the beautiful Miss Playdell. No comfort can be found for one who sits expectant of a brother's death. I bade poor Nancy keep up her heart and hope for the best. The fever increased during the day, we heard, and the delirium. We stirred not out of the house save for morning prayers, sending Cicely from time to time to ask the news. And all the company gathered together on the terrace, not to talk scandal or tell idle stories of each other, but to whisper that Will Levitt was certainly dying, and that it would go hard with Lord Chudley, who would without doubt be tried for murder, the two grooms protesting stoutly that their master had not struck a blow. In the evening Sir Robert Levitt came to our lodging. He was heavily afflicted with the prospect of losing his only son, albeit not a son of whom a parent could be proud. Yet a child cannot be replaced, and the line of the Levitts would be extinguished. My dear, he said, I come to say a thing which has been greatly on my mind. My son was run through by Lord Chudley. Tell me first what there is between you and my lord. Doth he propose to marry you? Dear sir, I replied, Lord Chudley has offered me his hand. And you have taken it. Unworthy as I am, dear sir, I have promised, should certain obstacles be removed, to marry him. His sword has caused my Will's death. Yet the act was done in defense of the woman he loved, the woman whom Will designed to ruin. And in self-defense as well. Had he not drawn, Will would have beaten out his brains. Tell him from Will's father, my dear, that I forgive him. Let not such a homicide dwell upon his conscience. Where is he? He has gone away with Sir Miles Lackington to await the finding of an inquest. Tell him that I will not sanction any proceedings, and if there is to be an inquest my evidence shall be, though it bring my grey hairs with sorrow to the grave, that my lord is innocent, and drew his sword to defend his own life. He left me, poor man, to return to the sick bedside. He had been gone but a short time when a postboy rode to the door, blowing a horn. It was a special messenger, who had ridden from Temple Bar with a letter from Sir Miles. Sweet Kitty, wrote the baronet, I write this to tell thee that we have taken up quarters in London. I have bestowed my lord in certain lodgings, which you know, above the room where once I lay. Heavens, my lord was in my own old lodging beside the Fleet Market. He is downhearted, thinking of the life he has taken. I tell him that he should think no more of running through such a madman in defense of his own life than of killing a pig. Pig, and worse than pig, was the creature who dared to carry off the lovely Kitty. To think that such a rustic clown should be brother of pretty Nancy. I have sent to my lord's lodging an agreeable dinner and a bottle of good wine, with which I hope my lord will comfort his heart. Meantime, they know not, in the house, the rank and quality of their guest. I suppose the fellow is dead by this time. If there is an inquest, I shall attend to give my evidence, and the verdict can be none other than justifiable homicide or even felo de se, for if ever man rushed upon his death it was Will Levitt. I have also sent him paper and pens with which to write to you, and some books and a pack of cards. Here is enough to make a lonely man happy. If he wants more he can look out of the window and see the porters and fishwives of the market fight, which was a spectacle daily delighted me for 2 years and more. The doctor is well. I have informed him privately of the circumstances of the case, and Lord Chudley's arrival. He seemed pleased, but I took the liberty of warning him against betraying to my lord a relationship, the knowledge of which might be prejudicial to your interests. Prejudicial to my interests. Sir Miles was in league with me, to hide this thing from a man who believed, like Solomon Stalabras, that I was all truth and goodness. I had borne so much from this wicked concealment that I was resolved to bear it no longer. I said to myself, almost in the words of the prayer book, I will arise and go unto my Lord. I will say, forgive me, for thus and thus have I done, and so am I guilty. O my noble lord, O great heart and true, what am I, wicked and deceitful woman, that I should hope to keep thy love? Let it go, tell me that you can never love again one who has played this wicked part. Let hatred and loathing take the place of love, let all go, and leave me a despairing wretch, so that I have confessed my sin and humbled myself even to the ground before him whom I have so deeply wronged. Chapter 21. How Kitty Went to London. Oppressed with this determination, which left no room for any other thought, I urged upon Mrs. Esther the necessity of going to London at once, as we had resolved to do before the accident. I pointed out to her that, after the dreadful calamity which had befallen us, for which most certainly no one could blame us, we could take no more pleasure in the gaieties of Epsom, that we could enjoy no longer the light talk, the music, and the dancing, that the shadow of death had fallen over the place so far as we were concerned, that we could not laugh while Nancy was weeping, and that, in short, my lord was in London and I must needs go too. There are 100 good reasons, said Mrs. Esther, why we should go away at once, and you have named the very best of all. But dear child, I would not seem to be pursuing his lordship. Indeed, I replied, there will be no pursuing of him. Oh dear madam, I should be, and here I burst into tears, the happiest of women if I were not the most anxious. She thought I meant that I was anxious about Will's recovery, but this was no longer the foremost thing in my thoughts, much as I hoped that he would get better, which seemed now hopeless. Let us go, dear madam, and at once. Let us leave this place, which will always be remembered by me as the scene of so much delight as well as so much pain. I must see my lord as soon as I can. For oh, there are obstacles in the way which I must try to remove, or be a wretched woman forever. Child, said Mrs. Esther severely, we must not stake all our happiness on one thing. But I have so staked it, I replied. Dear madam, you do not understand. If I get not Lord Chudley for my husband, I will never have any man. If I cannot be his slave, then will I be no man's queen. For oh, I love the ground he walks upon, the place where he lodges is my palace, his kind looks are my paradise. I want no heaven unless I can hold his hand in mine. I refrained from setting down all I said, because I think I was like a mad thing, having in my mind at once my overweening love, my repentance and shame, and my terror in thinking of what my lord would say when he heard the truth. Had my case been that of more happy women, who have nothing to conceal or to confess, such a fit of passion would have been without excuse. But I set it down here, though with some shame, yet no self-reproach, because the events of the last day or two had been more than I could bear, and I must needs weep and cry, even though my tears and lamentations went to the heart of my gentle lady, who could not bear to see me suffer. For consider, the son of my kindest friends to be lying like to die, run through the body by my lover. I could not be suffered to see his mother, who had been almost my own mother. I could never more bear to meet my pretty Nancy without thinking how, unwittingly, I had enchanted this poor boy, and so lured him to his death. That merry, saucy girl would be merry no more. All our ways of kindly mirth and innocent happiness were gone, never to return. Even if Will recovered, how could there any more be friendship between him and me? For the memory of his villainous attempt could never be effaced. There are some things which we forgive because we forget. But this thing, though I might forgive, none of us would ever forget. And at the back of all this trouble was my secret, which I was now, in some words, I knew not what to confess to my lord. Poor Mrs. Esther gave way to all I wanted. She would leave Epsom on Monday. Indeed, her boxes should be packed in a couple of hours. She kissed and soothed me, while I wept and exclaimed, in terms which she could not understand, upon woman's perfidy and man's fond trust. When I was recovered from this fit, which surely deserved no other name, in which passion got the better of reason, and reason and modesty were abandoned for the time, if Solomon Stalabras had seen me then, how would he have been ashamed for his blind infatuation? We were able calmly to begin our preparation. First we told Cicely to go order us a postchaise for Monday morning, for we must go to London without delay. Then I folded and packed away Mrs. Esther's things, while she laid her down to rest a while, for her spirits had been greatly agitated by my unreasonable behavior. Then Cicely came to my room to help me, and presently I saw her tears falling upon the linen which she folded and laid in the trunk. Foolish Cicely, I said, thinking of my own foolishness, why do you cry? Oh, Miss Kitty, she sobbed, who would not cry to see you going away, never to come back again. For I know you never could come here any more after that dreadful carrying away, enough to frighten a maid into her grave. And besides, they say that Epsom is going to be given up, and the assembly rooms pulled down, and we should not have had this gay season unless it had been for my lord and his party at the Durdans. And what we shall do, mother and me, I can't even think. Why, here was another trouble. Miss Kitty, this silly girl threw herself on her knees to me and caught my hand. Take me into your service when you marry my lord. How do you know I am to marry my lord, Cicely? There are many things which may happen to prevent it. Oh, I know you will, because you are so beautiful and so good. I snatched my hand away. I haven't offended you, Miss Kitty, have I? All the world cries out that you are as good as you are beautiful, and haven't I seen you for near 2 months, always considerate and never out of temper with anybody, not even with me, or your hairdresser, or your dressmaker, whereas Miss Peggy Baker slaps her maid and sticks pins into her milliner. That is enough, Cicely, I said. I have no power to take anybody into my service, being as penniless as yourself. But if that event should happen which you hope for, why then, I do not say. It will happen. Oh, I know that it will happen. I have dreamed of it 3 times running and always before midnight. I threw a piece of apple peel yesterday and called it to name your husband. It first made a G, which is Geoffrey, and then a C, which is Chudley. And mother says that everything in the house points to a wedding as true as she can read the signs. Oh, Miss Kitty, may I be in your service? I laughed and cried. I know not which, for the tears were very near my eyes all that time. But oh, that thing did happen which she prophesied and I longed for. I will quickly tell you how. And as I have said before, I took Cicely into my service, and a good and faithful maid she proved, and married the curate. I forgot to say that when young Lord Eardesley heard the story of her father's elopement with Jenny Medlicott, he laughed, because his mother, Jenny's friend and far-off cousin, had taken her away to Virginia with her, where, after I hope the death of Joshua Crump, she had married again. Jenny, it appeared, was the daughter of the same alderman whose fall in 1720 ruined my poor ladies, and it was for this reason that his lordship afterwards, when Cicely had a houseful of babies, took a fancy to them, and would have them, when they were big enough, out to Virginia. Here he made them overseers, and in course of time settled them on estates of their own, where some of them prospered, and some, as happens in all large families, wasted their substance and fell into poverty. The next day, being Sunday, we spent chiefly over our devotions. It was moving to hear the congregation invited to pray for one in grievous danger, meaning poor Will, who would have been better at this moment had he sometimes prayed for himself. Nancy sat beside me in our pew, and caught my hand at the words. One could not choose but weep, poor child, for there was no improvement in Will's fever. All night long the doctor had sat beside his bed, while the lad, in his delirium, fancied himself riding races, wrestling, boxing, and drinking with his boon companions. A pitiful contrast, the pleasures of the world in his mind and eternity in prospect. Yet for a man in delirium, allowance must be made. The fever was now, in fact, at its height, and 4 men were necessary to hold him down in his ravings. We spent a gloomy Sunday indeed, Mrs. Esther being so saddened by the anxieties of our friends that she resumed her reading of Drelingcourt on Death, a book she had laid aside since we left the Rules. And we observed a fast, not so much from religious motives, as because, in the words of Mrs. Esther, roast veal and stuffing is certain to disagree when a heart of sensibility is moved by the woes of those we love. In the evening we had it cold, when Nancy came to sit with us, her eyes red with her weeping, and we were fain to own that we were hungry after crying together all day long. Hot meat, said Mrs. Esther, at such a juncture would have choked us. Nancy said that after what had happened, it would certainly be impossible for us to stay longer at Epsom, and that for herself, all she hoped and expected now was shame and disgrace for the rest of her life. She wished that there were convents in the country to which she could repair for the rest of her days, go with her hair cut short, get up in the middle of the night for service, and eat nothing but bread and water. For, she said, I shall never cease to think that my own brother tried to do such a wicked thing. Nancy as a nun made us all laugh, and so with spirits raised a little, we kissed and said farewell. Nancy promised to let me know every other day by post, whatever the letter should cost, how things went. It seemed to me, indeed, as if, seeing that Will had not died in the first 24 hours, the chance was somewhat in favor of his recovery. And he was so strong a man and so young. I sent a message of duty and respect to Sir Robert. I dared not ask to have my name so much as mentioned to Will's mother, and left Nancy in her trouble, full of mine own. Before we started next morning, Cicely went for news, but there was no improvement. The stable boy, she told me, was going about the town, his arm bandaged up, saying that if ever a man was murdered in cold blood it was his master, because he had never a sword and only a stick to defend himself with. Also, it was reported that among the lower classes, the servants, grooms, footmen, and such, the feeling was strong that the poor gentleman had met with foul play. Asked whether they understood rightly what Mr. Will Levitt was doing, Cicely replied that they knew very well, and that they considered he was doing a fine and gallant thing, one which would confer as much honor upon the lady as upon himself, which shows that in this world there is no opinion too monstrous to be held by rough and uneducated people. Wherefore we ought the more carefully to guard the Constitution and prevent the rabble from having any share in public business, or the control of affairs. Our carriage took us to London in 3 hours, the road being tolerably good, and so well frequented, after the first 3 miles, that there was little fear of highway robbers or footpads. And so we came back to our lodgings in Red Lion Street, after such a 2 months as I believe never before fell to the lot of any girl. Remember that I was a wife, yet a maiden, married to a man whom I had never seen except for a brief quarter of an hour, who knew not my name, and had never seen me at all, making allowance for the state of drunkenness in which he was married, that I knew this man's name, but he knew not mine, that I met him at Epsom, and that he had fallen in love with me, and I, God help me, with him, yet that there was no way out of it, no escape, but that before he could marry me again, I must needs confess the deceit of which I had been guilty. No heaven, say the Roman Catholics, without purgatory, yet suppose, after going through purgatory, one were to miss one's heaven. How could I best go to my lord and tell him? He was in hiding, in the rules of the Fleet, and in our old lodging looking over the Fleet Market by one window, and over Fleet Lane by the other, a pleasant lodging for so great a lord. Could I go down to him, in hoops and satin, to tell him in that squalid place the whole truth? Yet go I must. Now, while we drove rapidly along the road, which is smooth and even between Epsom, or at least between Streatham and London, a thought came into my mind which wanted, after a little, nothing but the consent of Mrs. Esther. A dozen times was I upon the point of telling her all, and as many times did I refrain, because I reflected that, although she knew all about the carrying away of girls from the romances which she read, a secret marriage in the Fleet, although she had lived so long in the rules, and even knew my uncle and thought him the greatest of men, was a thing outside her experience, and would therefore only terrify her and confuse her. Therefore I resolved to tell her no more than I was obliged. But then my plans made it necessary that I should leave her for a while, 2 or 3 days, perhaps, or even more. So soon, therefore, as we had unpacked our trunks, and Mrs. Esther was seated in an armchair to rest after the fatigues of the rapid journey, I began upon the subject of getting away from her, hypocritically pleading my duty towards the doctor, my uncle. I said that I thought I ought to pay him a visit, and that after my return to London he would certainly take it unkindly if I did not. That, considering the character of the place in which he unhappily resided, it was not to be thought that a person of Mrs. Esther's sensibility could be exposed to its rudeness, and that, with her permission, I would the next day take a coach, and unless the doctor detained me, I would return in the afternoon. We had so firmly maintained our resolution to forget the past, that Mrs. Esther only smiled when I spoke of the rudeness of the market, and said that no doubt it was desirable for a gentlewoman to keep away from rude and unpolished people, so that the elevation of her mind might not be disturbed by unpleasant or harassing scenes. At the same time, she added, there were reasons, doubtless, why I should from time to time seek out that great and good man, now in misfortune, to whom we all owed a debt of gratitude which never could be repaid. She therefore gave me permission to go there, it being understood that I was to be conveyed thither and back again in a coach. In the morning, after breakfast, I dressed myself for the journey, and because I thought it likely that I might remain for one night at least, and perhaps more, I took with me a bag containing my oldest and poorest clothes, those, namely, in which I was dressed while in the market. Then I wrapped myself in a hood which I could pull, if necessary, over my face, and so disguised I stole down the stairs. London streets are safe for a young woman in the morning, when the throng of people to and fro keeps rogues honest. I walked through Fetter Lane, remembering that here Solomon Stalabras was born. Indeed, I passed a little shop over which the name was painted on a swinging sign of the Silver Garter, so that one of his relatives still carried on the business. Then I walked along Fleet Street, crowded with chairs, carriages, wagons, and porters. The Templars were lounging about the gates of their inns, the windows of the many vintners' houses were wide open, and within them were gentlemen drinking wine, early as it was. The coffee houses were full of tradesmen who would have been better at home behind their counters. Ladies were crowding into the shops, having things turned over for them. Prentices jostled each other behind the posts. Grave gentlemen walked slowly along, carrying their canes before them like wands of office. Swaggering, young fellows took the wall of everyone except of each other. The street was full of the shouting, noise, and quarreling which I remembered so well. At the end was the bridge with its quacks bawling their wares which they warranted to cure everything, and its women selling hot furmity, oysters, and fish. Beyond the bridge rose before me the old gate of Ludd, which has since been pulled down, and on the left was the Fleet Market, at sight of which, as of an old friend, I could have burst into tears. The touters and runners for the Fleet parsons were driving their trade as merrily as ever. Among them, I recognized my old friend Roger, who did not see me. By the blackness of one eye and the brown paper sticking to his forehead, one could guess that competition among the brethren of his craft had been more than usually severe of late. Prosperity, I thought to myself, works speedy changes with us. Was it really possible that I had spent 6 long months and more in this stinking, noisy, and intolerable place? Why could I have had one moment of happiness when not only was I surrounded by infamy in every shape, but I had no hope or prospect of being rescued? In 8 short months these things had grown to seem impossible. Death itself, I thought, would be preferable to living among such people and in the midst of such scenes. I recognized them all. It gave me pain to feel how familiar they were. The mean, scowling faces, stamped with the seal of wicked lives and wicked thoughts. Such faces must those souls wear who are lost beyond redemption, and the deformed men and boys who seem to select this market as their favorite haunt. There are many more deformed among the poor than with the better sort, by reason of the accidents which befall their neglected children and maim them for life. That would account for the presence of many of these monsters, but not of all. I suppose some of them come to the market because the labor of handling and carrying the fruit and vegetables is light, though poorly paid. There were hunchbacks in great plenty, those whose feet were clubbed, whose legs were knock-kneed, whose feet were turned inward, whose eyes squinted. I looked about me for, but did not see, a certain dreadful woman whom I remembered, who sold shellfish at a stall and had fingers webbed like a duck. But there was the other dreadful woman still in her place, whose upper lip was horrid to look at for hair. There was the cobbler who refused to shave because he said it was unscriptural, and so sat like one of the ancients with a long white beard. There were, alas, the little children, pale, hungry-looking, with eager, sharp eyes, in training for the whip, the gallows, or the plantation. They ran about among the baskets. They sat or stood among the stalls waiting for odd jobs, messages, and parcels to carry. They prowled about looking for a chance to steal. It was all as I remembered it, yet had forgotten so quickly. On the right, the long wall of the Fleet prison. Beyond that, the doctor's house, his name painted on the door. I pulled my hood closer over my face and passed it by, because before paying my respects to my uncle I was going to make inquiries about the man I loved. He was, as I knew, in our old lodgings. He slept, unconscious, in my room. He sat where I had so often sat. The place ought to have reminded him of me. But he knew nothing. The name of Kitty Playdell was not yet associated in his mind with the rules of the Fleet. When we went away, one of those who bade us Godspeed and shed tears over our departure was Mrs. Dunkirk, who, as I have told, lived above us with her husband, Captain Dunkirk, and her 2 little girls. The captain, who was not a good man or a kind man, drank and gambled when he got any money, and left his poor wife and children to starve. It was to her that I meant to go. She was a kind-hearted woman, and fond of me for certain favors I had been able to show her little girls. I was sure to find her in the same lodgings, because in the rules no one ever changes. I came to the house. I pulled the hood so close about my face that had my lord met me he would not have known me. The door was standing wide open as usual. I entered and mounted the stairs. The door of the room, our old room on the first floor, was half open. Within, oh my heart, I saw my lord sitting at the table with paper before him, pen in hand. I dared not wait, lest he might discover me, but hastened upstairs to Mrs. Dunkirk's room. I was fortunate enough to find her at home. The captain was gone abroad and had taken the children with him for a morning's walk. She sat at home, as usual, darning, mending, and making. But oh, the cry of pleasure and surprise when she saw me, and the kisses she gave me, and the praise at my appearance, and the questions after Mrs. Esther. I told her of all, including Sir Miles Lackington and Solomon Stalibers's good fortune. Then she began to tell me of herself. They were as poor as when we went away, but their circumstances had improved in one important particular. For though the captain was no more considerate, as I guessed from a word she dropped, and drank and gambled whenever he could, They had a friend who sent them without fail what was more useful to them than money, food and clothes for the children and their mother. She did not know who the friend was, but the supplies never failed, being as regular as those brought by the prophet's ravens. I did not need to be told the name of this friend, for in truth, I had myself begged the doctor to extend his charity to this poor family, and asked him to send them beef and pudding, which the children could eat, rather than money, which the captain would drink. This he promised to do. Truly, charity in his case ought to have covered a multitude of sins, for he had a hand ever open to give, and a heart to pity. Moreover, he gave in secret, and never did his right hand know what his left hand was doing. Then I opened my business to Mrs. Dunkirk, but only partially. I told her that on the first floor, in the rooms formerly occupied by ourselves, there was a young gentleman, well known to Sir Miles Lackington, who had reason to be out of sight for a short time, that he was also known to myself. Here I blushed, and my friend nodded and laughed, being interested, as all women are in the discovery of a love secret, that I was anxious for his welfare, that I had made the excuse of paying a visit to the doctor in order to be near him, that, in fact, I would be about him, wait upon him, and watch over him, without his knowledge of my presence. "But he will most certainly know thee, child," she cried. "Tell me, my dear, is he in love with thee?" "He says so," I replied. "Perhaps he tells the truth." "And you, oh Kitty, to think of you only a year ago." "There is no doubt about me," I said. "For, oh, dear Mrs. Dunkirk, I am head over ears in love with him, yet I will so contrive that he shall not know me if you will help." "And what can I do?" "Make his acquaintance, go and see him, tell him that he must want someone to do for him, offer to send him your maid PHBE, yes, PHBE. Then I will go, and if he speaks to me, which is not likely, I will answer in a feigned voice. Go now, Mrs. Dunkirk, I will dress for PHBE. She laughed and went away. My lord lifted his head, as she knocked at the door. "I ask your pardon, sir," she said, "for this intrusion. I live above you, upon the second floor with my husband and children. I suppose, sir, that, like the rest of us in this place, you come here because you cannot help it, and a pity it is to find so young a gentleman thus early shipwrecked." "I thank you, madam," said my lord, bowing, "for this good will. The will is nothing, sir, because people in misfortune ought to help each other when they can. Therefore, sir, and because I perceive that your room is not what a gentleman's should be, being inch thick with dust, I will, with your permission, send down my maid when you go out, who may make you clean and tidy." "I shall not go out," replied my lord, "but I thank you for the offer of the girl. I dare say the place might be cleaner." "She is a girl, sir," replied Mrs. Dunkirk, "who will not disturb you by any idle chatter. PHBE, here she stepped out upon the stairs. PHBE, come downstairs this minute and bring a duster." When PHBE came, she was a girl whose hair was pulled over her eyes, and she had the corner of her apron in her mouth. She wore a brown stuff frock, not down to her ankles. Her hands were whiter than is generally found in a servant. Her apron was of the kind which servant maids used to protect their frocks, and she wore a great cap tied under the chin and awry, as happens to maids in the course of their work. In one respect, beside her hands, PHBE was different from the ordinary run of maidservants. Her shoes and stockings were so fine that she feared his lordship would notice them. But he noticed her not at all, neither shoes, nor hands, nor cap, nor apron, which, though it was foolish, made this servant girl feel a little pained. "PHBE," said Mrs. Dunkirk, "you will wait upon this gentleman and fetch him what he wants. And now do but look at the dust everywhere. Saw one ever such untidiness? Quick, girl, with the duster and make things clean. Dear me, to think of this poor gentleman sitting up to his eyes, as one may say, in a peck of dust." She stood in the room with her work in her hand, rattling on about the furniture and the fineness of the day, and the brightness of the room, which had 2 windows, and the noise of the market, which, she said, the young gentleman would mind, more than nothing at all, after a while. As for the dreadful language of the porters and fishwives, that, she said, was not pleasant at first. But after a little one got, so to say, used to it, and you no more expected that one of these wretches should speak, without breaking the 3rd commandment and shocking ears, used to words of purity and piety, then you would expect His Grace the Archbishop of Canterbury himself to use the language of the market. She advised the young gentleman, further for his own good, not to sit alone and mope, but to go abroad and ruffle it with the rest, to keep a stout heart, to remember that fortune frowns one day and smiles the next, being a deity quite capricious and untrustworthy. Therefore that it behoved a young man to have hope, and she exhorted him in this end to seek out cheerful company, such as that of the great Dr. Shovel, the only chaplain of the fleet, as learned as a bishop and as merry as a monk, or even to repair to the prison and play tennis and rackets with the gentlemen therein confined, but above all, not to sit alone and brood. Why had he never a sweetheart to whom he could write, and send sweet words of love, whereby the heart of the poor thing would be lightened, and her affections fixed? So she rattled on, while I, nothing loth, plied duster, and cleaned up furniture with a zeal surpassing that of any housemaid. Yet, because men never observe what is under their eyes, he observed nothing of all this activity. If I had crawled as slowly as possible over the work, it would have been all one to him. Presently I came to the table at which he was sitting. This, too, was covered with dust. It had been our table formerly, and had grown old in the service of the Pimpernel ladies. I brushed away the dust with great care, and in so doing I saw that he had a letter before him, just begun. It commenced with these enchanting words. Love of my soul, my goddess Kitty. Oh, that I could have fallen at his feet then and there and told him all. But I could not, I was afraid. He had, as yet, written nothing more. But on a piece of paper beside the letter he had traced the outlines of a woman's head. Whose head should it be, I ask you, but Kitty's? I was amazed at the sight. My color came and went. PHBE, cried Mrs. Dunkirk warningly, be careful how you touch the papers. There, sir, we have your room straight for you. It looks a little cleaner than it did a while since. Surely, he replied without looking around. Yes, I am truly obliged to you, madam. As for this girl, still he would not look at me, perhaps. He placed a whole crown piece in my hand. A crown piece for such a simple piece of work, enough to make the best of housemaids grasping. This is how men spoil servants. Can I get you anything, sir? I asked in a feigned voice. Nothing, child, nothing. Stay, yes, one must eat a little sometimes. Get me some dinner by and by. This was all for that time. We went away, and we spent the rest of the morning in making him such a little dinner as we thought must please him. First we got from the market a breast of veal, which we roasted with a little stuffing, and dished with a slice or two of bacon, nicely broiled, some melted butter made with care, and a lemon. This, to my mind, forms a dish fit for a prince. We added to this some haricot beans, with butter and sweet herbs, and a dish of young potatoes. Then we made a little fruit pudding and a custard, nicely browned, and at 2 o'clock put all upon a tray, and I carried it downstairs, still with my hair over my eyes, my cap still awry, and the corner of the apron still in my teeth. I set the food before him and waited to serve him, but he would not let me. Ah, had he known how I longed to do something for him, and what a happiness it was simply to make his dinner, to prepare his vegetables for him, and to boil his pudding. But how should he guess? I found Sir Miles's bottle of wine untouched in the cupboard, and placed it on the table. Then I left him to his meal. When I returned, I found he had eaten next to nothing. One could have cried with vexation. Lord, sir, I said, still in my feigned voice, if you do not eat you will be ill. Is there never a body that loves you? He started, but hardly looked at me. A trick of voice, he said. Yet it reminded me, is there anybody who loves me, child? I think there is, to be sure, there is someone whom I love. Then, sir, you ought to eat, if only to please her, by keeping well and strong. Well, well, I dare say I shall be hungry tomorrow. You can take away the things, PHBE, if that is what they call you. I could say no more, but was fain to obey. Then, as I could do no more for him, I took up the tray and resolved to go and see the doctor, with whom I had much to say. Therefore I put off my servant's garb, with the apron and cap, and drew the hood over my face again. The doctor's busy time was in the morning. In the afternoon, after dinner, he mostly slept in his armchair, over a pipe of tobacco. I found him alone thus enjoying himself. I know not whether he slept or meditated, for the tobacco was still burning, though his eyes were closed. There is this peculiarity about noise in London, that people who live in it and sleep in it do not notice it. Thus, while there was a horrible altercation outside his very windows, a thing which happened every day and all day long, the doctor regarded it not at all. Yet he heard me open and shut the door, and was awake instantly. Kitty, he cried, why, child, what dost thou here? I hope, sir, I said, that I find you in good health and spirits. Reasonable good Kitty, a man of my years, be he never so temperate and regular in his habits, finds the slow tooth of time gnawing upon him. Let me look at thy face. Humph, one would say that the air of Epsom is good for young maids' cheeks, But why in Fleet Market, child? Partly, sir, I came to see you, and partly to see someone else, of whose lodging in the rules I have been told by Sir Miles Lackington. Tell me, the young man whom he wounded, is he dead? Nay, sir, not dead, but grievously wounded, and in a high fever. So, a man in early manhood, who has been wounded by a sword running through his vitals, who 4 days after the event is still living, though in a high fever, that man, methinks, is likely to recover, unless his physician, as is generally the case, is an ass. For my dear, there are as many incompetent physicians as there are incapable preachers. Their name is Legion. Well, Kitty, you came about Lord Chudley. Have you seen him? Yes, but sir, he does not know that I am here. I saw him. Here I blushed again, in disguise as a housemaid. Ho ho ho, laughed the doctor. Why, girl, thou hast more spirit than I gave thee credit for. Thou deservest him, and shalt have him too, the time is come. He rose and folded his gown about him, and put on his wig, which for coolness' sake he had laid aside. I will go to him and say, my lord, the person to whom you were married is no other than— Oh no, sir, I pray you do not speak to him in such fashion. Pray hear me first. Well, well, let us hear this little baggage. The doctor was in very good spirits, and eager to unfold this tale. He sat down again, however, and took up his pipe. Go on then, Kitty, go on, I am listening. This was, indeed, a very critical moment of my life, for on this moment depended, I foresaw, all my happiness. I therefore hesitated a little, thinking what to say and how to say it. Then I began. I reminded my uncle that, when I first came under his protection, I was a young girl fresh from the country, who knew but little evil, suspected none, and in all things had been taught to respect and fear my betters. I then reminded him how, while in this discipline of mind, I was one morning called away by him, and ordered to go through a certain form, which, granting that I well knew it to be the English form of marriage service, I could not really believe to mean that I was married, and though my uncle assured me afterwards that such was the case, I so little comprehended that it could be possible, that I had almost forgotten the whole event. Then, I said, we had gone away from the rules of the fleet, and found ourselves under happier circumstances, where new duties made me still more forget this strange thing. Presently we went to Epsom, whither, in the strangest way, repaired the very man I had married. After this, I told him, the most wonderful thing in the world happened to me. For not only did my lord fall in love with me, his legal wife, but he gave me to understand that the only obstacle to his marrying me was that business in the fleet, of which he informed me at length. Very good, said the doctor. Things could not go better. If the man has fallen in love with the girl, he ought to be pleased that she is his wife. Nay, that would not do either. For here another thing of which the doctor had no experience, being a man. For when a woman falls in love with a man, she must needs make herself as virtuous and pure in mind as she is brave in her dress, in order the more to please him and fix his affection. And what sort of love would that be where a woman should glory, as it were, in deception? Why, his love would be changed, if not into loathing, then into a lower kind of love, in which admiration of a woman's beauty forms the whole part. Now, if beauty is everything, even Helen of Troy would be a miserable woman, a month after marriage, when her husband would grow tired of her. Alas, I cried, I love him. If you tell him, as he must now be told, that I was the woman who took a part in that shameful business. Yes, sir, even to your face I must needs call it shameful. You may tell him at once that I release him so far as I can. I will not acknowledge the marriage. I will go into no court of law, nor will I give any evidence to establish my rights. Whom God hath joined, the doctor began. Oh, I know, and you are a clergyman of the church with power and authority by laying on of hands. Yet I cannot feel that any blessing of heaven could rest upon a union performed in such a place. Is this room, nightly desecrated by revellers, a church? Is your profligate wretch Roger a clerk? Where were the banns put up? What bells were rung? Banns are no longer fashionable, he replied, but let me think. He was not angry with my plainness of speech, but rather the contrary. Let me think. He went to his cupboard, took out his great register, and turned over the leaves. Aye, here it is, having a page to itself, Geoffrey Lord Chudley to Catherine Playdell. Your ladyship is as truly Lady Chudley as his mother was before him, but if you will give up that title and dignity— Here he smiled and tore out the page, but carefully. I will not balk thee, child. Here is the register, and here the certificate of the wedding. He put both together, and laid them carefully aside. Come to me tomorrow, and I will then go with you to his lordship, and give him these papers to deal with as he pleases. Chapter the last. How Lord Chudley received his freedom. I returned to my lodging, there to await the event of the next morning. My lord would learn that he was free, so far good. But with his freedom would come the news that the woman who restored it to him was the same who had taken it away, and the same whom he had professed to love. Alas, poor Kitty! Now was I like unto a man sentenced to death, yet allowed to choose the form of his execution, whether he would be hanged, poisoned, beheaded, stabbed, shot, drowned, or pushed violently, and suddenly out of life in some other manner which he might prefer. As the time approaches, his anxiety grows the greater until the fatal moment arrives when he must choose at once. Then, in trouble and confusion, he very likely chooses that very method which is most painful in the contemplation and the endurance. So with me, I might choose the manner of telling my lover all, but tell him I must. Pray heaven, I said, to direct me into the best way. In the afternoon I became once more PHBE. PHBE carried a dish of tea. Would the gentleman choose to taste it? He took it from PHB's hand, drank it, and returned to his writing, which was, I believe, a continuation of that letter, the commencement of which I had seen. In the evening Sir Miles paid him a visit of consolation. He drank up what was left of the bottle, and, after staying an hour or so, went away, noisily promising himself a jovial night with the doctor. At 8 o'clock, PHBE brought a tray with cold meat upon it, but my lord would take none, only bidding her to set it down and leave him. "Can I do nothing more for you, sir?" asked the maid. He started again. "Your voice, child," he said, although I had disguised my voice, "reminds of one whose voice." "La, sir," she asked, "is it the voice of your sweetheart?" He only sighed and sat down again. PHBE lingered as long as she could, and then she went away. Then we all went to bed. Captain Dunkirk had by this time brought home the little girls and gone to the doctor's, where, with Sir Miles and the rest, he was making a night of it. It was a hot night, the window was open, the noise of the brawling and fighting below was intolerable, the smell from the market was worse than anything I remembered, and the bed was a strange one. Added to all this, my cares were so great that I could not sleep. Presently I arose and looked out, just as I had done a year before when first I came to my uncle for protection. Everything was the same. There was light enough to see the groups of those who talked and the forms of those who slept. I remembered the old and the young, as I had seen them in the bright light of a July dawn. Poor wretches, destined from their birth to be soldiers of the devil, elected for disgrace and shame, born for Newgate and Bridewell, brought into the world for the whipping post, the cart-tail and the gallows. Just the same, and I alone changed. For beneath me, all unconscious, was one whom I might call my husband. Then my thoughts went wholly out to him. Then I could neither sit nor rest, nor stand still with thinking of the next day, and what I had to say and how to say it. Oh, my love, my dear, could I bear to give him up? Could I bear to see him turn away those eyes which had never looked upon me save with kindness and affection? Could I endure to think that his love was gone from me altogether? Death was better, if death would come. Then, crazed, I think, with trouble, I crept slowly from the room, and went down the stair till I reached the door of the room where my lord was lying. And here I went on like a mad thing, having just enough sense to keep silence, yet weeping without restraint, wringing my hands, praying, offering to heaven the sacrifice of my life, if only my lover would not harden his heart to me, and kissing the while the very senseless wood of the door. Within the room he was sleeping unconscious. Without I was silently crying and weeping, full of shame and anxiety, not daring to hope, yet knowing full well his noble heart. Why had I weeks before dared to tell him all? Forgiveness would have been mine, I knew it well. Yet now in such a place, when he was reminded of the companions, or at least the creatures who had surrounded her, would he not harden his heart and refuse to believe that any virtue, any purity could survive? All this was of no avail. When I was calmed, a little I returned to my own room, and sat upon the bed, wondering whether any woman was so miserable in her shame as myself. The long minutes crept on slowly. The daylight was dawning. The night had passed away. Captain Dunkirk had rolled up the stairs noisily, singing a drunken song. The revelers below were quiet, but the morning carts had begun when I fell asleep for weariness, and when I awoke the sun was high. So I arose, dressed, and hastened downstairs, hoping to see the doctor before he sallied forth. There had been, Roger told me with a smile, a great night. He meant that the doctor's guests had been many, and their calls for punch numerous. Sir Miles had been carried away to some place in the neighborhood. The doctor was still abed. While we talked he appeared, no whit the worse for his night's potations. Yet I thought his face was of a deeper purple than of old, and his neck thicker. That was very likely an idle fancy, because a few months could make but little difference in a man of his fixed habits. Well, Kitty, he was in good humor, and apparently satisfied with the position of things. I have thought over thy discourse of yesterday, which, I confess, greatly moved me. First, because I did not know thee to be a girl of such spirit, courage, and dignity, and second, because I now perceive that the marriage performed in thy interest was perhaps, as things have now turned out, which is surely providential, a mistake. Yet was it done for the best, and I repent me not. Come then to my lord, and let me talk to him. First, sir, I begged, tell him not my name. He promised this, though, as he said, the name was on the register, and it was agreed between us that we should speak to my lord privately, and then that he was to call me, when I should play my part as best I could. The doctor led the way. When he entered the room I ran upstairs, and with trembling hands made myself as fine as I could. That is, I was but in morning dishabille, but I dressed my hair, and put those little touches to my frock and ribbons which every woman understands. And then I put on my hood, which I pulled quite over my face, and waited. My lord rose angrily when he saw the doctor. Sir, he said, this visit is an intrusion. I have no business with you, I do not desire to see you. Leave the room immediately. First, said Dr. Shovel, I have business with your lordship. I can have no business with you, replied Lord Chudley. I have already had too much business with you. Go, sir, your intrusion is an insult. Dear, dear, the doctor replied. This it is to be young and hot-headed and to jump at conclusions. Whereas, did the young gentleman know the things I have to say, he would welcome me with open arms. You come, I suppose, to remind me of a thing of which you ought to be truly ashamed, so wicked was it. Nay, nay, not so wicked as your lordship thinks. The doctor would not be put out of temper. What a benefactor is he who makes young people happy, with the blessing of the church. I cannot, I suppose, use violence to this man, said the other. He is a clergyman, and for the sake of his cloth must be tolerated. Would you kindly, sir, proceed at once to the business you have in hand and then be gone? If you come to laugh over the misfortune caused by yourself, laugh and go your way. If you come for money for the wretched accomplice in your conspiracy, ask it and go. In any case, sir, make haste. My lord, the doctor replied, I am a messenger, from one who conceives that she hath done you grievous wrong, is very sorry for the past, which she alone can undo, and begs your forgiveness. Who is that person, then? His curiosity was roused, and he waited in patience to hear what the doctor might have to say. It is, my lord, the lady who may, if she chooses, call herself your wife. My lord stood confused. Does she wish to see me? She wishes to place in your hands. Here the doctor's voice became deeper and more musical, like the low notes of a great organ, the proofs of her marriage with you. Does your lordship comprehend? She will stand before you, bringing with her the only papers which exist to prove the fact. She will put them in your own hands if you wish, she will destroy them before your eyes if you wish, and she will then retire from your presence, and you shall never know, unless you wish it, the name of the woman you married. But, this is wonderful. How shall I know that the papers are the only proof of the ceremony? Your lordship has my word of a Christian priest. I break the laws of God and of man daily. I am, however, a sinner who still guards those rags and tatters of a conscience which most sinners hasten to throw away, wherefore must my repentance be some day greater. Yet, my lord, my word I never break, nor ever look to hear it questioned. You shall have all the proofs. You shall be free if you please from this moment. You shall never be molested, reproached, threatened, or reminded of the past. Free, my lord repeated, looking the doctor in the face. I cannot but believe, sir, what you solemnly aver to be the truth. Yet what am I to think of this generosity? How interpret it? By what acts have I deserved it? What am I to do in return? Is there any pitfall or snare for me? In return, you will grant her your forgiveness. That is a pitfall, if you please. You will also expect a surprise. Strange, said Lord Chudley. Kitty asked me, too, to forgive this woman, my forgiveness. Does she ask for no money? My lord, you are utterly deceived in your belief as to this woman and her conduct. By your leave, I will tell you the exact truth. You know, because I told you, that the wrong inflicted upon me by your father was my justification, from a worldly point of view, for the advantage which I took of your condition. You think, I suppose, that some miserable drab was brought in from the market to play the part of dummy wife, and threaten you and persecute you for money. You are wrong. There was living in this place at the time, with a lady of ruined fortunes, a young woman of gentle birth by her father's side, though penniless. She was beautiful exceedingly, well-educated, a God-fearing damsel and a good girl. By her mother's side she was my niece, that branch of her family being of obscure origin. On the death of her father she became for a time my ward, which was the reason why she lived here. No fit place for a girl of good reputation, I own, though at the time I could do no better for her. She was not only all that I have described her in appearance, carriage, and virtues, but she was, as well, very much afraid of me, her guardian. She had been brought up to obey without questioning her spiritual pastors and masters, and all who might be placed in authority over her. This girl it was whom you married. The doctor paused, to let his words have due effect. When I designed the treachery, you being then sound asleep, it first seemed to me that the fitting person for such a revenge as I at first proposed to myself would be one of those women who are confined to the fleet for life, unless by hook or crook they can get them a husband. Such a one I sent for. I did not disclose the name of the man I proposed, because I found her only too eager to marry anyone upon whom she could saddle her debts, and so make him either pay them or change places with her. But while I talked with the woman, I thought how cruel a thing it would be for your lordship to be mated with such a wife, and I resolved, if I did give you a wife against your knowledge, that she should be worthy to bear your name. Accordingly I dispatched this person, who is still, I suppose, languishing in the prison hard by, and sent for the young lady. She came unsuspiciously. I told her with a frown which made her tremble that she was to obey me in all that I ordered her to do, and I bade her then take her place at the table and repeat such words as I should command. She obeyed. Your lordship knows the rest. But she must have known that she was actually married. She could not understand. She had seen marriages performed, but then it was in a church with regular forms. She did not know until I told her. Besides, I ordered her, and had my command been to throw herself from a high tower, she would have obeyed. She was not yet 17, she was country-bred, and she was innocence itself. Poor child, said my lord. She has left the rules of the fleet for some time. She knows that at any time she might claim the name and the honors of your wife, but she has refrained, though she has had hundreds of opportunities. Now, however, she declares that she will be no longer a party to the conspiracy, and she is desirous of restoring, into your own hands, the papers of the marriage. Will your lordship first forgive her? Tell her, said my lord, that I forgive her freely. Where is she? She waits without. Then he called me, but not by name. My knees trembled and shook beneath me as I rose, pulled the hood tighter over my face, and followed the doctor into the room. In my hand I held the papers. This, said the doctor, is the young gentlewoman of whom we spoke. The papers are in her hands. Child, give his lordship the papers. I held them out, and he took them. All this time he never ceased gazing at me, but he could see nothing, not even my eyes. Are we playing a comedy? He asked. Dr. Shovel, are we dreaming, all of us? Everything, my lord, is real. You hold in your hands the certificate of marriage and the register, not copies, the actual documents. Before you read the papers and learn the lady's name, tell her in my hearing that you forgive her. She bids me tell you for her that since she learned the thing that she had done, what it meant, and whose happiness it threatened, she has had no happy day. Forgiveness, said my lord, in a voice strangely moved, while his eyes softened. Forgiveness, madam, is a poor word to express what I feel in return for this most generous deed. It is a thing for which I can find no words sufficient to let you know how great is my gratitude. Learn, madam, that my heart is bestowed upon a woman whose perfections, to my mind, are such that no man is worthy of her, but she hath graciously been pleased to accept, and even to return my affection. Now by this act, because I cannot think that we are bound together in the eyes of the Church by that form of marriage service. It is a question, said the doctor, which it would task the learning of the whole country to decide, by ecclesiastical law, but let us leave this question unconsidered. Nothing need ever be said about the matter, your lordship is free. Then, he still held the papers in his hand, and seemed in no way anxious to satisfy his curiosity as to the name of the woman who had caused so much anxiety. Before we part, perhaps never to meet again, may I ask to be allowed to see the face of the lady who has performed this wonderful act of generosity? I trembled, but made no answer. Stay a moment, he said. Remember that you have given up a goodly estate with a large fortune and an ancient name, things which all women rightly prize. These things you have given away. Do you repent? I shook my head. Then let me never know. He tore the papers into 1,000 fragments. Let me never know the name of the woman to whom I owe this gift. Let me think of her as of an angel." The doctor took me by the arm as if to lead me away. "Since you do not want to know her name, my lord, I do not see any reason why you should. Let us go, child." "May I only see her face?" he asked. "Come, child," urged the doctor. "Come away, there is no need, my lord." But those words about myself, his nobleness, had touched me to the heart. I could deceive him no longer. I threw back the hood, put up my hands to my face, and fell at his feet, crying and sobbing. "It is I, my lord. It was Kitty Playdell herself, the woman whom you thought so good. Oh, forgive me, have pity." Now I seem to have no words to tell how he raised me in his strong arms, how he held me by the waist and kissed me, crying that indeed there was nothing in his heart towards me but love and tenderness. Would it not be a sin to write down those words of love and endearment with which, when the doctor left us alone, he consoled and soothed me? I hid nothing from him. I told him how I had well nigh forgotten the dreadful thing I had done, until I saw him again at the assembly, how from day to day my conscience smote me more and more, and yet I dared not tell him all for fear of losing his respect. Let us pass this over. The story of Kitty is nearly told. We forgot all about poor Will, and the reason why my lord should for a while lie close. We agreed that we would be married quietly, in due form, and of course at church, as soon as arrangements could be made. And then nothing would do but my lord must carry me to Mrs. Esther, and formally ask her permission to the engagement. You may think how happy was I to step into the coach which brought me back to my dear lady, with such a companion. He led me into her presence with a stately bow. "Madam," he said, "I have the honor to ask your permission to take the hand of your ward, Miss Kitty, who hath been pleased to lend a favorable ear to my proposals. Be assured, dear madam, that we have seriously weighed and considered the gravity of the step which we propose to take, and the inclination of our hearts. And I beg you, madam, to believe that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to making this dear girl as happy as it is in the power of one human creature to make another." Mrs. Esther was perfectly equal to the proper ceremonies demanded for the occasion, although, as she confessed, she was a great deal surprised at the suddenness of the thing, which, notwithstanding that she had expected it for many weeks, came upon her with a shock. She said that his lordship's proposal was one which the world would no doubt consider a great condescension, seeing that her dear Kitty, though of good family, had no other prospects than the inheritance of the few hundreds which made her own income. But, for her own part, knowing this child as she did, and here she spoke in terms of unmerited praise of beauty and goodness, and such qualities as I could lay but small claim to possess, yet resolved to aim at them. Finally, she held out her own hand to his lordship, saying, "Therefore, my lord, as I consider Kitty my daughter, so henceforth will I consider you my son. And may God keep and bless you both, and give you all that the heart of a good man may desire, with children good and dutiful, long and peaceful lives, and in the end to sit together for ever in happy heaven." Whereupon she wept, falling on my neck. Now, while we were thus weeping and crying, came Sir Miles, who immediately guessed the cause, and wished my lord joy, shaking him by the hand. Then he must needs kiss my hand. "The doctor," he explained, "told me where I should most likely find you. The doctor's knowledge of the human heart is most extensive. I would I had the doctor's head for punch. My lord, this is a lucky day. Will Levitt is out of his fever, and hath signed a written confession that your sword was drawn in self-defense, and that had he not been run through, his cudgel would have beaten out your brains. Therefore there is no more to keep us in hiding, and we may go about joyfully in the open, as gentlemen should. And as for Will, he may die or live, as seemeth him best." "Nay, Sir Miles," I said, "pray that the poor lad live and lead a better life. This is the story of Kitty Playdell, how she came to London and lived in the rules of the fleet, how she was made to go through the form of a marriage, how she left the dreadful, noisy, wicked place, how she went to Epsom, how Lord Chudley fell in love with her to her unspeakable happiness, and how she told him her great secret. The rest, which is the history of a great and noble man married to a wife whose weakness was guided and led by him in the paths of virtue, discretion, and godliness, cannot be told. I have told what befell some of the actors in this story. Solomon Stalabras, I have explained, married the brewer's widow. Will Levitt recovered and did not repent, but lived a worse life after his narrow escape than before. As for the rest, Mrs. Esther remained with us, either at Chudley Court or our town house. Harry Temple was wise enough to give up pining after what he could not get, and married Nancy, so that she, too, had her heart's desire. Sir Miles went on alternately gaming and drinking till he died of an apoplexy at 40. There remains to be told the fate of the chaplain of the fleet. When they passed the Marriage Act of 1753, the fleet weddings were suddenly stopped. They had been a scandal to the town for more than 40 years, so that it was high time they should be ended. But when the end actually came, the doctor, who had saved no money, was penniless. Nor could he earn money in any way whatever, nor had he any friends, although there were hundreds of grateful hearts among the poor creatures around him. Who could contribute to his support except ourselves? Mrs. Esther, on learning his sad condition, instantly wrote to offer him half her income. My husband, for his part, sent a lawyer among his creditors, found out for what sum he could effect a release, paid this money, which was no great amount, and sent him his discharge. Then, because the doctor would have been unhappy out of London, he made him a weekly allowance of 5 guineas, reckoning that he would live on 1 guinea, drink 2 guineas, and give away 2. He lived to enjoy this allowance for 10 years more, going every night to a coffee house, where he met his friends, drank punch, told stories, sang songs, and was the oracle of the company. He took great pride in the position which he had once occupied in the rules of the fleet, and was never tired of boasting how many couples he had made into man and wife. I know that his life was disreputable and his pleasures coarse, yet when I think of the doctor and of his many acts of kindness and charity, I remember certain texts, and I think we have reasonable ground for a Christian's hope as regards his deathbed repentance, which was as sincere as it was edifying.